It all starts in a strategic simulation game called Evil Queenmaker, where the goal is to become a mentor and train the lowest level demon lord straight to the very top. The game was highly praised for its world building and story, being a true homage to classic simulation titles. The MC was a loyal fan who spent his time hyping up the game on forums and even fought on the internet to defend the title's reputation. But all that love turned into pure frustration when the game simply went down the drain. The developers got a little too carried away with the good reception and rushed an expansion in less than 1 year. Instead of delivering what the fans expected, they shoved in a bunch of bizarre and nonsensical endings, totally ruining the story. With that, the young man went from being the #1 fan to its biggest critic, pouring all his frustration into a heavy review. After writing that the creators had ruined the characters and the mechanics he trusted so much, something unexpected happened. The development team, who never replied to anyone, sent a message challenging him to make a better ending all by himself. Annoyed by the audacity, the young man barely has time to react before being swallowed by a mysterious flash of light coming straight from his computer screen. Dizziness takes over as he floats in a dark space filled with purple energy. Totally disoriented, he wonders where in the world he ended up. Just then, a huge eye appears right in front of him. Noticing the presence of the mysterious being, the MC tries to figure out who that shadowy figure is. The mysterious being whispers incomprehensible words, leaving the MC even more confused. The headache continues as he begins to open his eyes. He comes across a gate in front of him and tries to understand where he was taken. The landscape reveals a gigantic academy located on a floating island, a majestic and oddly familiar scenery. Touching the gate's bars, he gets the strange feeling that he has seen that place before. The confirmation comes when he looks at the flag at the top of the tower, displaying the exact crest of the game, Evil Queenmaker. Panic hits hard as he realizes he was literally sucked right into the game's universe. Trying to keep his cool, the boy deduces that his consciousness has taken over the body of some character from the story. His thoughts are interrupted by a well-dressed older gentleman approaching and calling him Lord Nin. The name doesn't make any sense to him right away, causing some confusion. But looking closely at the face of the gentleman on the other side of the gate, the MC recognizes him as Kane. The butler repeats the exact same classic intro phrase he always said to players on the title screen. Kane deeply thanks him for volunteering to educate the Demon Lord, confirming the young man's new role. The memory of the developer's ironic message comes back to his mind, revealing the true reason he's there. The reality check hits him hard, making him realize he is in incredibly deep trouble on this absurd mission. Somewhere else in the castle, the maid asks the little white-haired girl if her attempt to make her look more mature turned out well. Looking a bit awkward, she admits that she feels a little weird wearing that kind of outfit. The maid can barely contain her excitement, seeing such an incredibly cute scene. Trying to calm the situation down, the maid says the girl's anxiety is just because of the new mentor's arrival. To cheer the Lord up, she reveals with a huge smile that she asked the chef to prepare a special pudding. The little girl says thanks with her eyes sparkling, making the woman even more emotional at the adorable sight. The cute moment is cut short by knocks on the door and the butler's voice announcing his presence outside. He politely lets them know that the volunteer stepping up as the new teacher is already waiting. Ready to fulfill her duty, the little ruler takes a step forward with absolute determination. Completely changing her posture to look like a serious figure, she orders them to head straight to the audience room. Sitting on her gigantic throne, the girl announces she is ready to receive the highly anticipated guest. The huge doors of the hall then open and firm footsteps echo through the grand room. The MC respectfully kneels before the throne, paying his respects to his new student. He then stands up with flawless posture and introduces his new official name to the girl. In his mind, the memory pops up that this child is the sole heir to the ancient and powerful Demon Lord. The game's lore tells that her father fell in battle during a disastrous conflict 2 years ago. With that terrible tragedy, the poor child was forced to take the throne at just 5 years old. The bloodline's power drastically dropped in the rankings right after, putting the entire clan's future at imminent risk. Back in the present, the girl runs quickly toward the MC. Then she bows and greets him in a really cute way, and asks the mentor to speak casually, since she is now just his humble student. Accepting the dynamic right away, he gently pats her head and asks to be called just teacher. With a confident posture and a gentle smile, The guy promises to turn her into the greatest ruler of all time. The girl accepts the commitment, with a glimmer of hope in her eyes, excited for the future. As soon as the official audience ends, the MC grabs the doorknob and leaves the hall, closing the heavy door. Away from prying eyes, he collapses on the dark hallway floor in total despair over the situation he just got himself into. The shock hits him full force as he questions his own sanity for voluntarily taking on such a dangerous job. Even being an expert who completed all the events and saw every game ending, reality feels way too overwhelming. Pulling his own hair, he admits that clicking a mouse didn't prepare him to protect someone in the real world. The biggest problem is that he doesn't know how to use any magic, but he ended up accepting the mission purely out of a fan's impulse when he saw the girl. Neen confesses to himself that he acted on autopilot because he knew the pain of that lonely child all too well. Even thinking about giving up and running away from that massive responsibility, something strange awakens inside his eye. A sharp pain hits his head as an intense flood of memories from the body's previous owner invades his mind all at once. The memory reveals the true identity of that being, showing an imposing figure wrapped in overwhelming power. Looking at his own hands, he is relieved to find out that he now possesses all the abilities of this great ancient demon. With this new power pulsing through his veins, his confidence returns and the initial fear completely vanishes. A confident smirk forms on his face as he realizes he finally has what it takes to create the perfect ending. However, his excitement drops a bit when he notices that the magic only returned in small, fragmented pieces. The next day, the little lord asks the teacher why the class is taking place outdoors in the garden. The teacher explains that practical outdoor learning brings much better results than being stuck in a stuffy room. During the chat, Neen notices the teddy bear that didn't exist in the original game, and amiably asks if the toy is also joining the class. And she says it's her best friend. Noticing the girl's strong attachment, he deduces there's a sad backstory behind it and decides not to push her. From a distance, the butler watches their interaction, very relieved to see that his young master is doing well under the new tutor's care. To make the girl more comfortable, the MC plays along and welcomes the bear to the training session. Excited by the teacher's understanding, she raises the plushie's little paw in response, officially starting her training. The little lord asks if the training will also include lessons on the history of the demonic realm, but Neen lets her know that the focus of the day will be mana control, going against Kane's recommendation to focus on the basics. He justifies the change by saying Kane is too stiff with the rules, leaving the students surprised. The teacher explains that to protect herself and her people, she needs to understand the extent of her own power through practical disciplines. Excited, Seer raises her little hand saying she loves the idea, but points out she has already finished her royal studies. The guy wags his finger and warns that theory only matters if put into practice. Snapping his fingers, the mentor argues that theory is only valuable when applied, noting that her submission to other demons proves her lack of practice. The girl looks at the object curiously, and the mentor explains that it is a training diary. Neen promises that if she does her homework right, she will get pudding as a reward, planning to increase her affection points. Getting back to the lesson, he draws a diagram showing that everyone has a fixed amount of mana stored in a core. With her finger on her chin, the girl asks what determines the amount of mana someone can use. Using the illusion of a huge demon, the teacher reveals that everyone has circuits throughout their body and asks what their function is. Pointing to the glowing pathways, he confirms they are energy channels and asks what happens if there are many of them. Quickly, the student deduces that usable mana depends on the number of these circuits, earning praise from the teacher. Seer blushes with pride while hugging the toy, as Neen decides he will never hold back on compliments to keep her motivated. The teacher shows his glowing hand and explains that stored mana comes from birth, but circuits increase with hard work. To demonstrate, he fires a colossal pillar of red energy that pierces the skies above the garden. With his arm raised, Neen states that with a lot of training and enough mana, she will also be able to unleash a blast like that. Seer is amazed by the power, while Kane adjusts his monocle, completely shocked by the demonstration. The butler realizes that even though the young man is a stranger, he definitely has the necessary skills for the job. The little girl looks up full of hope and asks if she can do that too, getting a positive answer. The teacher reminds her that she's a proud daughter of the Devated bloodline, making the girl promise she will try her absolute best. It doesn't take long for the news about the weakest lord getting a mentor to spread through the demonic channels. Andromalius, the lord of the 70th floor, mocks the situation, calling the girl a failed piece of garbage. Meanwhile, Dantalion, from floor 69, ignores the gossip and demands his subordinates bring more profitable info. Holding a glowing orb, Decarabia from floor 68 questions what he is supposed to do with such useless information. On the other hand, a lord relaxing in a magical bath surrounded by butterflies finds the news very interesting. Her servant reports that he investigated the sneeing guy but found nothing about the fool who took the job. Intrigued by the mystery, the woman rises from the water, smiling as the drops run down her body. With a mischievous look, she orders them to get everything ready as it has been a while since she went out for some fun. Walking down the hallway, Seer thinks about the homework the teacher assigned, determined to finish it all even though she finds it hard. The little lord approaches Cecily, who greets her back looking quite surprised, not understanding the girl's shy attitude. However, the student suddenly stops as she remembers her task, leaving the maid even more confused by that behavior. She then calls her maid by name. The fox quickly turns around with a friendly posture and wags her tail, asking the young lady what she needs. Gathering her courage, Seer points at the servant and firmly orders her to start cleaning the place at once. The sudden command catches Cecily totally off guard. Soon after, the employee goes back to sweeping the floor using magic, gently reminding her that she is already taking care of the cleaning. But upon noticing the scroll in the child's hands, the fox recognizes the training diary. Cecily figures out that the new mentor instructed the girl to give orders to practice her ruler posture and decides to play along. Bowing respectfully, Cecily promises to obey the command and asks the Lord not to worry about it anymore. Faced with this respectful response, Seer's eyes widen in surprise and an immense joy takes over her. Thrilled that she pulled it off, the little one runs back to class, leaving the maid enchanted by such cuteness. The girl skips happily through the garden, humming a melody as she goes to meet her teacher. Arriving at the training spot, she finds Nin and Kane talking and is warmly welcomed by the mentor. The Lord proudly announces she finished the lesson, getting a head pat from the teacher and the promise of a gift. Hugging her little bear, she looks thoughtful, trying to decide what would be a good reward. With her eyes shining, Seer asks for a friend for her toy, making Kane smile out of the corner of his mouth. But the joy suddenly fades and a gloomy aura surrounds the girl, who steps back saying she doesn't need it. Nin instantly realizes the issues the castle's finances, exactly like in the game, and decides to step in. Stroking his student's hair, he suggests taking over the money management in the butler's place. The little girl looks at the mentor with wide eyes, not understanding the sudden proposal. Kane gets defensive and asks, annoyed, if the guy wants to mess with the royal budget just over a doll. Turning his back, the teacher questions if the old man wouldn't like to see the immense happiness of the little one getting a new toy. The butler adjusts his monocle, completely torn, touched by the thought of seeing his young master smile. Meanwhile, Seer is already imagining how awesome it would be to hold two teddy bears at the same time. Sighing in defeat, Kane admits he is worried but makes it clear he has no personal interest in that money. Nin steps closer to the gentleman and asks him not to get the wrong idea. He doesn't think he's incompetent, they just have different talents. With a lot of confidence, the young man asks to handle it, promising to turn the student into the greatest symbol of the demonic tower. Just then, the girl shyly tugs on the teacher's coat sleeve to get his attention. Looking up, the girl states with all sincerity that she will trust his words. With a huge smile on her face, Seer kindly asks the teacher to make a lot of money for them. The guy flashes a wicked smile in the shadows and promises that the gold will soon start rolling in on its own. Changing the subject, the mentor invites the student to start the day's lesson, and she agrees excitedly. The practical training begins with the Lord trying to control her mana from a distance while the two adults watch. Wrapped in a red aura, the girl focuses as much as she can, impressing Nin with her ease. Without taking her eyes off the target, she keeps the energy flow steady and focused on the palms of her hands. Noticing the effort, the teacher claps his hands, ending the exercise, admitting he would love to push her harder if he could. Kane runs over frantically with a towel to dry the child's sweat, worried about her low physical stamina. Nin pats the student's head, praising her good work and telling her to rest before physical training. A little later, the kid has already regained her energy and is back to running in circles around the garden with her teddy bear. Watching the scene from afar, the guy asks the butler if there's any special reason she won't let go of that toy. The older man reveals it was a 5th birthday gift given by her father, explaining its immense sentimental value. With a serious expression, the mentor remembers that the passing of the former lord was a key plot point in the game's story. The moment of reflection is interrupted by the heavy footsteps of a messenger approaching and calling the butler urgently. The out-of-breath messenger hands Kane a letter, letting him know it was sent by Lord Marbas from floor 71. Analyzing the situation, Nin wonders what that floor could be demanding so suddenly. Understanding the butler's worry, he knows that in the demonic realm, the simple change of a ruler drastically alters the entire balance of military and economic power. But flashing a confident smile, the guy tells the old man not to be so afraid, because this was exactly what he was waiting for. A few days later, a luxurious carriage arrives at the castle gates, and Nin tells the butler to relax a bit. Dressed in simple clothes and guiding the horses, the teacher warns that the old man will be pressured either way. Kane agrees, sweating cold, noticing that even their driver has a terrifying aura, while Nin greets the visitor. The magical disguise reveals the imposing figure of the demon Baphomet, and the guy comments on the irony of such a being posing as a simple lackey. The butler and the other staff are completely shocked by the reveal, calling the mentor's name in disbelief. With a calm smile, the teacher asks what they thought of that fascinating demonstration. Just then, the carriage door opens, revealing an elegant woman stepping down the stairs. The servants bow in immediate reverence as the visitor steps onto the courtyard floor with absolute dominance. Nin gives a polite bow, saying it is a great honor to receive Her Majesty, Citri, for the first time. Surprised that he saw right through the disguise, the Lord concludes the guy isn't just some nobody and decides to accept the welcome. The mentor shoots back by asking if an ordinary person would be put in charge of educating a demon lord, making the woman smirk and agree with his point. Kane watches the interaction, outraged, thinking the teacher should understand the difference in ranks and not act so boldly. The visitor questions the butler, but Nin quickly steps in, suggesting they continue the conversation inside. The guy politely blocks the way and demands a good reason for the visit, warning that high ranks don't give the right to invade territories. Hearing this, Citri realizes that in the past, rulers would never dare to look at her with such audacity. However, finding his attitude amusing, she opens her fan and states she came to do business with the ruler of floor 72. The Lord perfectly understands the mentor's play, realizing he used her presence to remind everyone of Seer's status. Pleased, the teacher apologizes for the rudeness, justifying his role as protector, and offers to guide her to the drawing room. Before walking in, the woman orders Baphomet to wait outside, ensuring she won't let anything slip by unnoticed. Walking through the luxurious hallways, the ruler quickly notices the lack of staff working in the place. Kane regretfully admits that the finances are terrible, and the Lord scoffs, asking whose fault this embarrassing situation would be. Already settled in the drawing room, Citri impatiently asks when the little lord will be joining them. Crossing her legs in a provocative way, she calls Nan out on the fact that he demanded respect for the child, yet he's the one handling urgent matters in her place. The guy catches on to the woman's intentions and asks in a sarcastic tone if she's trying to use her charms to seduce him. Unfazed, he lets her know he took over the castle's finances, making it clear she'll have to negotiate directly with him now. Holding his teacup, the teacher mentions the recent invasion by human adventurers and the military casualties that helped defend floor 72. The visitor argues that Seer's army would never withstand the invasion alone and that the extra troops were sent purely out of her great kindness. Hearing that cynical speech, the guy flashes a dark smile and calls her the absolute worst without the slightest hesitation. Citri's eyes widen in pure shock, asking what he just said, thinking she heard him wrong. But the teacher takes a sip of his tea calmly, confirming that she heard him perfectly well. Furious at the disrespect, the woman slams her cup on the table and demands to know how he dares use that tone. The room begins to shake as the Lord stands up, radiating a crushing red aura, reminding him of her superior position. The magical pressure makes Kane fall to his knees on the floor, but Nin stays seated, sarcastically asking the reason for all the anger. He exposes the truth, stating that she forced a mana debt onto someone weaker just to squeeze money out of them, proving to be true trash. Completely blinded by rage at being exposed, the ruler screams that the guy's arrogance has crossed every line. With a swift motion, she fires a massive blast of flames straight at the couch. Glaring mercilessly, the Lord declares that this is the punishment he brought upon himself for his insolence. The destructive blazing inferno swallows the mentor and a large part of the drawing room in a burning flash. However, amidst the flames, the teacher remains untouched and mutters that he tried to drop the subject just to spare Her Majesty's pride. Showing absolutely no effort, he raises his hand and snaps his fingers right in the middle of the fiery hell. The simple gesture creates a shockwave that instantly extinguishes the lethal attack, putting out the flames. The Lord stammers, completely in disbelief, seeing her supreme flames cancelled out with such ease. Walking through the smoke, the Dai calls the woman by her title, maintaining a terrifyingly calm posture. With an oppressive presence, he suggests that now the two of them finally have a civilized and intelligent conversation. Focusing his glowing eyes on her, the teacher reveals he has a very good proposal to offer. The ruler panics upon seeing the monstrous silhouette of an ancient white whale projecting right behind him. Trying to hide her terror, she scoffs, saying a nobody can't make proposals, but Nin guarantees she won't be able to refuse. With a shadowy smile, he reveals that the deal involves the invisible shackles binding Her Majesty. Even intimidated by the weight of his words, Citri tries to keep up her superior act in the face of such audacity. The mentor gets straight to the point, mentioning the seal restricting her powers, making the woman question if he even knows what he's talking about. Sitting back down on the couch, she gets annoyed, saying her drop from 12th place is public knowledge and tells him to get lost if he's just going to repeat that. The Lord points out that the sealing stone is hidden on a floor ruled by high-level demons, making it impossible for him to reach it. Ignoring her pessimism, the teacher snaps his fingers, making a magical floating scroll appear and proposes an official deal. He sends the document over to the woman, stating with conviction that he will help her break the cursed seal. Citri grabs the contract in the air and suspiciously asks exactly how he plans to fulfill this absurd promise. With a confident smile on his face, Nin simply replies that she just witnessed the power needed to pull it off. The room gets darker as the young man's shadow expands, and he warns that what she saw was just a tiny fraction of his true power. Utterly bewildered by the situation, the ruler asks what he really is, but Nin just answers that he is Seer's mentor. With the atmosphere much calmer, the teacher flashes a friendly smile and asks if she is willing to sign. Reading the finalized document, he concludes with satisfaction that the military alliance will guarantee the castle's safety without any losses for them. The guy knows the woman only accepted those abusive terms because of the clause where he promises to use all his strengths to help her. Analyzing the proposal, the Lord reflects that the power shown by the mysterious man was terrifying, surpassing even her own prime. With a confident smirk forming on her lips, Citri decides this is a gamble very well worth taking. Without wasting time, the mentor makes a small cut on his own thumb with a dagger, letting her know the signature requires a vital pact. Sitting comfortably, he presses his injured finger against the magical paper to seal his end of the bargain. The scroll glows with contract magic, registering Citri and Nin's fingerprints as the official representatives of the alliance. As soon as the signatures are complete, the document emits a bright red flash and activates the validation of the demonic pact. Holding his bleeding hand, the teacher gives a polite bow and says he is counting on Her Majesty's care from now on. The woman stands up, flicking a drop of vitality from her own finger into the air with a sharp motion, returning the new ally's trust. Soon after, Nin introduces the new ally to Little Seer, explaining that the ruler will help them with the castle's problems. The little girl gives a formal bow, thanking her for her kindness, making Citri totally awkward and forcing her to act nice. With the alliance locked in, Nin tells Citri she will need to relearn her manners from scratch now that they are allies, and she begrudgingly agrees. Just then, Little Seer nervously extends her hand, shyly suggesting that they get along. Her Majesty stares at her for a moment and replies a bit stiffly, calling the girl by her title. But the teacher quickly interrupts, praising the attitude, stating she should have done that from the very beginning, before explaining the contract. Keeping a confident tone, the guy reveals that the ruler will also become his student. The woman is outraged by the audacity, yelling that this is ridiculous, since she used to be a big shot among the demon lords. Showing no mercy, Nin claps back that right now she is nothing more than an ordinary, forgettable ruler whose power isn't anything special. Totally offended, Citri complains that he didn't need to go that far, reminding him that the human was the one who asked for help. Ignoring her tantrum, the mentor points out she probably thinks her growth has stopped and the only way out is to get her sealed power back. However, he guarantees she can still get much stronger, leaving the Lord shocked and suspicious of that claim. Even while calling him a liar, the woman reflects internally that, considering the guy's absurd power, maybe it really is possible. Meanwhile, Neen recalls the game's lore, where Citri searched for her lost power, grew stronger, and became Seer's greatest ally. The visitor demands he stop messing with the ruler, and the teacher assures her he's serious, suggesting they start executing the deal. Stopping her foot, Her Majesty points her finger, ordering him to visit her when he has time, demanding that the ally go to her. At that moment, Seer grabs the guy's arm tightly and shoots a fierce glare at the visitor, making it clear he is her teacher. Citri ignores the kid's annoyance and tells the mentor that visiting her one time a week will be enough. Annoyed by the attitude, the young lord asks if the woman is saying she will be desperate to see him. The teacher just keeps a mysterious tone, replying that they will find out the truth very soon. The alliance with Her Majesty was a total success, but there were still problems in the castle left to solve. In the training courtyard, the allied soldiers grumble, questioning why they are stuck in that boring place. A human soldier tells the lizard man to crawl back to his master if he hates being there so much, sparking friction. Before the fight gets worse, Varuna, the vice commander of Seer's 4th Legion, glares at both of them, telling them to keep talking. The human quickly apologizes while grabbing the lizard, and the officer demands less chatting and more training. As the vice commander walks away, he notices the vibe among the troops is a complete mess, dragging down the training. Watching it all from above, Commander Rent El Raza admits she already knew things would be loud for a while. A few days after this standoff with the soldiers, Neen sighs as he deals with yet another headache. Citri slams the table in a rage, asking if he wants to pick a fight and demanding to know why he can't train her anymore. With the little lord on his lap, the guy explains he's too busy trying to merge both forces and doesn't have any spare time. Taking the opportunity, he suggests he would be incredibly grateful if Her Majesty could lend a little hand with that. The woman grits her teeth in anger, realizing the human wants to force her to personally step into the training. The lord turns her back, huffing with rage and plotting revenge, and the teacher thinks it's great that this keeps her motivated. Turning his attention back to his student, the guy asks for one last favor, seeing if she would mind handling the finishing touches. Arriving at the training area, they are greeted by Commander Ren, who praises the little one's cuteness as always. The mentor says they came to check out where the girl will learn swordsmanship and also settle some pending business. Varuna gives a sarcastic laugh, implying that losing control of the chain of command is just a side gig for the teacher. Neen asks if keeping things in order shouldn't be the bare minimum, questioning if the vice commander has ever led troops before. Keeping up the provocative tone, the officer replies no, stating that uniting soldiers from different forces is no easy task. The teacher shoots him a serious look and challenges the soldier, telling him to pay close attention to how it's done. Varuna narrows his eyes suspiciously, warning that he will be watching his every move very carefully. A little later, the allied soldiers stop their drills, confused by the group approaching. On the 3rd training ground, Citri's troops recognize the young lord accompanied by the vice commander and the mysterious human. Walking next to the officer, Neen mentally acknowledges that Varuna is highly skilled and loyal to the bone. However, since his loyalty is strictly to Seer, the mentor decides to use this chance to earn the soldiers' respect too. The lizard Emsilan steps up to greet the child, and the teacher takes the lead, introducing himself as the one in charge of her. The monster violently squeezes the guy's hand, saying he knows him very well as the one to blame for separating them from Her Majesty. Without losing his cool, the teacher agrees, but claims he only spoke the truth when taking in lost souls like them. Furious at the mockery, the lizard crushes the human's hand hard, yelling if he thinks he can say whatever he wants just because he's the mentor. Name keeps a completely indifferent expression, only commenting that this was a rather violent handshake. In the blink of an eye, the monster lets out a groan of pain as his own hand is crushed effortlessly. The guy maintains the crushing grip and tells the soldier to pay better attention to the tone he is using. He points out that their new lord is standing right there, questioning if the soldier dares to pick a fight with the one who trains his master. Trembling in pain, the lizard man accuses the teacher of insulting his true commander's honor. The human gently pulls Seer forward and asks if the monster still thinks Citri is his ruler. The little girl steps up, giving off a slight magical presence, while Nin demands they take a good look at their new lord. The lizard blushes slightly, thinking the little girl is way too cute, but quickly shakes his head, remembering that's not the point. He stomps his foot again, stating his only master is Her Majesty Citri because at least she has some attitude. The mentor sighs, letting go of the stubborn guy's hand, warning that if that's how he feels, he has no other choice. A crushing dark red aura explodes from the teacher, covering the entire courtyard and terrifying the whole army. Varuna is paralyzed with dread in the middle of the magical storm, shocked by that absurd amount of mana. Walking with lethal intent, Neen announces he doesn't need disobedient dogs and gives one last chance before putting them down. Staring down at the fallen monster, the guy asks if he'd rather cling to the past and disappear or bet on a new future. The lizard lowers his head in defeat, admitting he swore loyalty to Citri and therefore must obey her orders. Satisfied with the answer, the teacher snaps his fingers, saying that level of loyalty will be very useful in the end. Just then, the sound of elegant footsteps echoes through the silence courtyard, drawing the attention of the entire army. Citri shows up calling the soldiers idiots, demanding they stop causing trouble and accept the forged alliance. The lizard tries to argue that the alliance is only on paper, but the woman tells him to shut his mouth and states the deal is real. Watching the scene, Nain tells his student that this solid partnership is exactly what she represents to both floors. The mentor kneels near the child, telling her seriously that this military union is essential for the upcoming conflict. After getting scolded by their former master, the soldiers bow their heads, apologizing for their rudeness and accepting the new reality. Accepting his fate, the lizard man points to the little lord and asks who they are from now on. With all the soldiers standing at attention, the teacher declares loud and clear that they are Lady Seer's army. Varuna is absolutely mind-blown seeing the guy solve the massive chain of command problem in such a short time. With their arms crossed, Her Majesty glares at the teacher, who shoots a look back, reminding her he said the soldiers would be useful. Happy with the outcome, the little girl hugs her teddy bear and gives a thumbs up, showing her determination. Neen makes the same gesture right back at her, ready to guide the little one's next steps. Citri comments that from now on, things should flow a lot more smoothly. The teacher holds out his hand to little Seer, asking her to hold it just for a moment. Without hesitating, the little girl grabs his hands super tight and waits. He tries to ask her to let go to make things easier, but the young lord flat out refuses. Hugging his arm, she warns that she doesn't want to let go at all, making the ally think it's just childish stubbornness. To settle it, the mentor simply lifts the child with one arm, leaving Her Majesty trembling with annoyance. Furious, the woman loudly demands to know exactly when he is going to start the training he promised. Unfazed, the guy assures her they can still do it just like that, leaving the ruler completely confused. Right then, a dark magical aura starts gathering around the human's feet as he announces the lesson of the day. An explosion of overwhelming power suddenly takes over the courtyard, catching the lord completely off guard. Feeling the weight of that energy, she hears the teacher announce that the challenge is just to land a single hit on him. The woman is outraged by the proposal, asking if he really thinks this kind of training will help with anything. Showing massive confidence amidst the shadows, Neen guarantees it will work perfectly. The pressure of the mana drastically increases, forcing Her Majesty to her knees while the human stares her down. The mentor states with absolute certainty that right now he is much stronger than the ruler ever was in her prime. He challenges her to break free from that oppressive pressure and try to land at least one direct attack to prove her worth. Pinned to the ground, the ruler can barely move and is terrified by the density of that ridiculous magic. Watching her struggle, the guy reflects that having a stronger ally will be a valuable weapon to expand Seer's influence. To provoke her, the human asks how she plans to solve her problems if she shakes so much under so little mana. He suggests she just give up as she's feeling humiliated, making the woman grit her teeth in pure rage. Neen knows that, to survive on the floor where her power is sealed, she'll need to adapt to the pressure of a superior energy. Plus, he is fully aware that her magical circuits will naturally expand as a bonus of this process. Turning his head slightly, he tells his student that this is the true goal of the training and asks her to watch everything closely. The little girl tilts her head and asks why she needs to pay attention to that right now. With zero pity, the mentor reveals that one day the kid will have to go through exactly the same rigorous training. As late afternoon approaches, the guy advises the ruler not to push her limits so much, since she isn't that young anymore. Exhausted and in a cold sweat, the woman barely has the strength to tell the human to shut his mouth. Gathering the rest of her energy, she swears she will manage to land at least one hit on him today. Seeing the ally panting on the ground, Nin acknowledges her past strength, noting that her adaptation is happening very fast. Just then, the young lord tugs on the teacher's sleeve, asking to be taught too, even though she already had a class that morning. Looking into those big, sparkling eyes, the human concludes that it is humanly impossible for any teacher to say no to the girl. Snapping his fingers in agreement, he says he will give a quick advanced lesson based on what they did earlier. The dark aura suddenly vanishes, leaving Citri totally confused by the guy's sudden change in posture. Relieved to finally catch her breath, Her Majesty dusts off her clothes while the mentor asks the girl to recall the day's lesson. He crouches down to the child's height and explains the theory about using the free-floating energy in the air to cast more powerful spells. To test her, the human asks what the exact method is to grab hold of that freely flowing mana. The little one raises her hand excitedly, saying you just have to ask for help, earning a head pat from the teacher for getting the right answer. Soon a doubt comes up, since the young lord confesses she has never talked to the energy before in her entire life. Reassuring his student, Nin raises his hand and makes a small amount of his own magic glow bright red. He explains that this spark serves to make friends with the surrounding mana and guide it to the user naturally. A massive tornado of scarlet flames erupts around the guy, showing off the overwhelming power of that mystical bond. With the fire out, the teacher asks if the little girl wants to try doing the same, and she accepts right away. Focused on the lesson, Seer reaches her little hand out with a look full of determination to pull off the magic. Immediately, small sparks of energy start gathering around her fingers very gently. Watching it all from afar, Her Majesty is impressed while the mentor instructs the child to keep pulling the power in slowly. The magical light gets brighter and brighter, leaving the visitor shocked by the absurd capability of a 7-year-old child. Faced with so much potential, the ruler realizes just how valuable that alliance is and swears to protect it at any cost. Pleased with the student's control, Nin asks her to pull the energy back in and wraps up the first step of the training. The little girl feels a slight discomfort in her chest, and the teacher clarifies that the weird feeling comes from the external energy. Since she isn't at full capacity yet, the human proposes a quick test combining both sources and tells her to imagine a flame. To set an example, he conjures a massive glowing skull of fire that roars menacingly in the air straight from his fingers. Following the instruction carefully, the young lord manages to manifest a tiny and very tame version of the same spell. When the guy tells her to copy his next move, Citri abruptly interrupts him, telling him to stop everything. The woman rushes over, totally stressed out, asking what kind of nonsense he is putting into the girl's head. Extremely anxious, Her Majesty explains that the big issue is that this specific spell is an ancient magic lost to time. The teacher confirms the info right away, leaving the ruler totally puzzled as to how a human knows that. Ignoring the question, Nin turns all his attention back to the little girl and asks her to repeat exactly what she just saw. Squeezing her eyes shut really tight, the girl focuses her entire mind only on the image of the burning flame. As a result of her focus, flaming letters form on their own in the empty space, glowing intensely in the air. She carefully raises her little hand and holds up the small magical symbol hovering just above her fingers. Amazed by her own achievement, the young lord lets out a gasp of surprise and receives sincere praise from her mentor. Petting the student, the guy recommends she keep practicing gathering energy every day so she doesn't forget the technique. Catching the visitor's stare, Nin turns his head and lets her know the bet to land a hit on him is only valid during practical training. A little embarrassed, the woman asks to learn that ancient magic too, but gets a nice loud no in response. Absolutely offended, she stomps her foot, reminding him she is also his student, but the human claims he still doesn't trust her for that. Jumping on the chance, the teacher teases that he might reconsider if their relationship gets a little more intimate. The ruler's face turns bright red, repeating the word while stammering at such a bold suggestion. Trying to hide her nerves, she turns her face away and agrees to the proposal, convincing herself it is just to get stronger. Looking totally awkward, Her Majesty asks what type of person the guy likes, leaving him and the child staring at her in confusion. The mentor cuts the awkward vibe, explaining that the intimacy he meant was purely political between floor 72 and 71. Dying of embarrassment over the mix-up, the woman tries to explain herself, but Nin just turns his back, asking for clearer proposals next time. Being carried back inside by the human, little seer looks over her shoulder, still trying to understand the ruler's meltdown. Later that night, the human sits in his office, realizing the previous owner of that body knew ancient magic because he was a great demon. He recalls that in the original timeline, the true identity of that creature was never revealed, always remaining an absolute mystery in the world. Writing his reports calmly, the guy decides not to waste energy trying to figure out why the body gets so defensive against other lords. Analyzing some documents in his office, Neen realizes he has a lot of immediate problems to handle. Calmly, the guy decides he will deal with each one of them step by step. However, the most urgent issue right now is the expansion of their military territory. He concludes it is still too early to attack the human realm, and the neighboring floor belongs to Her Majesty Citri, so that's off the table. Looking at the maps, the teacher notes that the 70th floor is ruled by Andromalius, and by joining forces with his ally, an invasion is perfectly doable. Right then, the human spots something in one of the intelligence papers and is shocked by the intel he just read. The next day, Little Seer runs into the office calling for her mentor super excitedly. Surprised by the sudden visit, he turns around to see what the little girl wants. El Raza walks in right behind holding the young lord's hand, apologizing for the intrusion, and explaining that the allied ruler insisted on tagging along. The guy reassures the commander saying it's no problem, thanking her for coming even though she is busy. Straight to the point, the woman brings up that the human had asked for her opinion on an important matter. Without wasting time, the teacher confirms he wants to discuss expanding their territory, leaving the warrior completely blown away. She warns that conquering the enemy will be very tough, because even with Citri's help, they are still at a massive disadvantage in raw power. Handing over a detailed document, the commander strongly advises extreme caution if he is planning a large-scale war. After analyzing the mentor's words more closely, she realizes an invasion is totally possible, as long as it isn't a direct clash. Confident in his logic, Neen asks what the commander thinks of this bold military strategy. The guy guarantees that, personally, he considers it an excellent play for their side right now. Agreeing with the idea, El Raza says they'll need a covert operation and will pick specialized infiltration troops right away. She also decides to ask the lizardman's opinion on the matter, even though she fears it might cause some internal friction. The mentor firmly reassures her, stating that everything will be fine and there is no reason to worry. He promises that the newly acquired troops are now willing to listen and follow commands properly. With that, the woman suggests gathering the scattered soldiers and forming a separate legion focused entirely on the mission. This structural move would help put down silly fights and complaints among troops from different floors. Plus, the commander states that creating the group will make the new soldiers way more loyal to the little ruler. Thinking over the proposal, the human concludes that the battalions will start seeing the young lord in a much better light. With the plan set, he agrees with the idea and even schemes to squeeze the operation funds out of Her Majesty Citri. The teacher then asks Seer's opinion, and the kid happily agrees with whatever he decides. Overhearing the talk about funds, Citri turns her back and announces she will also actively help out in the enemy operation. The guy stares at the ally highly suspicious, offending her as he deduces she must have terrible blood with the target lord. Right then, the human notices the little girl sneaking off toward the garden and asks where she's running off to in such a rush. Full of energy, Seer sprints across the lawn, calling everyone to play together, while Citri tries to keep up with her at all costs. Watching the scene from a distance, Neen lets out a soft sigh, thinking it's good they are burning off energy together to make things easier. Soon Her Majesty stops running, completely exhausted by the child's endless, unstoppable hype. Trying to catch her breath, the woman grumbles grumpily that dealing with all that pure childishness is just way too tiring. As the teacher casually walks over, the little one trips on the grass and gets sad seeing her teddy bear all dirty with mud. The guy pats his student's head and suggests they give the plush toy a nice bath to fix the problem real quick. Turning to the butler beside him, the human asks him to keep an eye on the ruler for a bit. The ally comments that the teacher seems very used to handling kids, but he shoots down that claim right away. He clarifies that he just focuses on what would make it easier for the young lord to accept things and act properly without throwing tantrums. Jumping on the chance, the mentor teases that Her Majesty acts without thinking, making the woman let out a screech of pure outrage. Ignoring her anger, the guy snaps his fingers, suggesting they pause the physical training to focus on the important military discussion. Stretching out, the woman asks his real reason for wanting to help, and the human knows she wouldn't believe it if he said it was just a whim. Getting serious, the ruler reveals that her own army was already prepping for a conflict against that same floor. Surprised, Neen reflects that in the original timeline, this battle would take years, wondering internally if his presence sped up the events. With no real reason to turn down the help, Her Majesty admits the situation is a win-win and straight up asks what the human plans to do. Totally ignoring the allies' complaints about the training being too cruel, the human announces it is time to get back to the drills. Far away, little Seer runs in a hurry and super happy through the castle halls holding her freshly washed teddy bear. The little girl jumps right into her teacher's arms, proudly showing off that the toy is sparkling clean. Holding the student tightly, the guy notices a massive change and asks if she dyed her hair white while he was gone. The butler steps in explaining that unlike other demons, Seer's rare bloodline stores external energy in her own hair strands. Immediately, the mentor realizes the kid naturally absorbed that magic earlier when he taught her how to use floating mana. He deduces the color goes back to normal when she spends the power, and the old man confirms, recalling that the former lord used to go redhead from hoarding so much energy. Thoughtful, the human concludes that this incredible skill lets the little one cast super high-cost spells even though she's just a kid. Petting the young lord's head, he lets her know she'll need to practice absorbing that energy a lot from now on. Casually turning his head, the teacher asks the butler exactly where Commander El Raza is at the moment. Meanwhile, in the dead of night, the dense urban landscape of the 70th floor rests quietly and shrouded in shadows. The commander watches the vast enemy territory from a rooftop, joined by one of her stealthiest soldiers. Hidden perfectly in the dark, the woman admires her new lord's tactical brilliance and how fast he figured everything out. Suddenly, the muffled sound of footsteps snapping dry branches cuts through the absolute silence of the dark forest. Keeping a calm stance, El Raza leans against a huge tree, staring intently at the suspicious enemy movement down below. One of the soldiers whispers, pointing at an isolated wooden cabin, noting that the place doesn't look dangerous at first glance. The commander reminds the crew that the little lord really wants to conquer that floor, and that's why they need to recruit Aaron's mercenaries. The subordinate seriously doubts the alliance is even possible, but sucks it up, saying their duty as warriors is just to follow orders. Keeping her focus on the lethal mission, the leader orders everyone to advance at once and swiftly leaps toward the set target. Near the rustic cabin, an aggressive magical presence can be felt as a deep voice warns that the spies have gone way too deep into their turf. The infiltrated soldier goes into pure shock when a razor-sharp blade appears just inches from his left eye in the darkness. In a split second, the strike team realizes they are completely surrounded on all sides by the dangerous mercenaries. One of Aaron's beefy warriors demands the intruders identify themselves, making the commander recognize the group's impressive level of training. The cabin door creaks open, revealing an imposing man casually walking out smoking his pipe in an intimidating way. Keeping a stiff posture, the mercenary leader asks straight up which of the night intruders is the squad's official rep. With a ton of determination and zero hesitation, El Raza takes a step forward out of the dark and takes full control of the negotiation. The man recognizes her instantly, totally mind-blown to see that one of the fallen lord's famous four swords is still alive. Wielding her glowing weapon, the warrior declares she dropped that old title a long time ago and now serves strictly as Lady Seer's blade. Talking frankly outside, the leader questions if the young ruler really plans to overtake that enemy floor and doubts the scheme. Sitting across from the mercenary around a campfire, the commander guarantees victory is certain, making the man very curious to see the proof. Sitting right across from the mercenary, the commander assures him that the military pact with Her Majesty's Citri is more than enough to topple the neighboring floor. Puffing on his pipe, the warrior hits back, saying an actual war is very different because the raw power of the 70th floor is still completely superior. He perfectly understands that her side needs an experienced guide to navigate the rocky borders efficiently. Keeping up the mystery, the man warns he won't give away all his tricks, but admits being intimidated by the overwhelming presence of the fortress's new mentor. Gulping hard, the mercenary boss is impressed to realize that the mysterious teacher packs the ancient power level of the generals. Making her determination crystal clear, El Raza gets serious and lets him know that the bold invasion plan isn't a joke at all. The warrior suggests they just wipe out the targets themselves if they are so strong, but gets reminded that it would draw the unwanted wrath of higher floors. Staring deep into the man's eyes, the subordinate warns that he won't walk away clean if he decides to snitch about this meeting to Andromalius's troops. Feeling the warrior's heavy pressure, the boss wonders internally if he's being threatened, fully aware of the terrifying strength Siu's blade holds. With that, the leader agrees to hear the terms, demanding safe passage for his army on the Allied floor in exchange for holding back the enemy lord's movements. Leveraging the deal, the commander throws a juicy reward on the table and advises the guy to trade his current crumbling loyalty for a solid guarantee. Later on, back in the office, Neen praises his warrior's excellent performance in the tense and risky border talks. Without wasting a second, the woman asks when the general troop mobilization will happen, receiving the direct order to get ready for conflict immediately. Spotting a sudden hesitation on the subordinate's face, the guy stops what he's doing and calmly asks if she still has something on her mind. Gathering her courage, the warrior asks forgiveness for being bold and questions why someone so insanely powerful would agree to serve the little lord. The commander argues that the human has way too many crazy skills to be stuck playing such a tiny role in the magical hierarchy. She can't find any logic in the mentor's choice to set up camp on literally the weakest and most looked down upon floor in the whole underworld. Understanding her concern, the guy figures his ally suspects some sort of takeover plot and agrees that the chance of an inside coup is never zero. Realizing how serious the doubt is, the human quickly tries to figure out how to justify all his actions without looking like a total crazy person to his subordinate. Going with the unusual truth, the teacher confesses he took the messy volunteer gig simply because the challenge looked incredibly fun. Absolutely dumbfounded by the childish answer, the warrior is at a loss for words while the human dives deeper into explaining his wild ambition. Hyped up, Neen states that turning the most despised young ruler into the supreme boss of the underworld is the most thrilling challenge out there. Hearing that this whole massive effort was just for his personal entertainment, Elraza feels a hit to her pride and clearly shows she isn't happy about it. Realizing his words sounded a bit cold, the guy changes his tone and admits he genuinely grew fond of the quirky folks in that castle. He starts listing the great reasons he stuck around, right away bringing up the rock-solid loyalty and strategic brilliance of the veteran butler Kane. Right after, the human praises the maid Leah for having a heart kind enough to flawlessly manage all the place's internal affairs. To back up his list, he mentions Cecily's amazing hustle at work and crowns the staff member Majul as the most talented cook in the entire realm. The teacher also acknowledges that, even though Vice Commander Varuna is a bit of a rebel, his fierce bravery on the battlefield is always unquestionable. Wrapping up his thought, the guy looks straight at El Raza and praises the woman's strength, resilience, and beauty, turning her face totally red. Seeing the commander completely overwhelmed by extreme embarrassment, the mentor just comments he is stating obvious facts and doesn't get why she is so shocked. Keeping the chat super chill, Neen says the chaotic routine of the 72nd floor fits his personal taste perfectly. Very firmly, the guy guarantees he will never be the first to betray the little lord, only asking that he doesn't get tossed aside in the future. He thanks the warrior for asking such a delicate question so honestly, reminding her that everyone's ultimate loyalty must be aimed only at Seer. Relieved by her military leader's mature attitude, the commander shows her gratitude for his understanding and politely excuses herself to finally get some rest. Watching the door shut quietly, the human reflects privately on how lucky the young ruler is to be guarded by such fantastic servants. Suddenly, the little girl pops up in the hallway calling for the master, who immediately asks why she is visiting right out of the blue outside class hours. The little kid walks up to the desk saying she just wanted to hang out, but soon locks her eyes on the thick financial reports in the human's hands. Using her distraction, the guy turns the finances into an economics lesson based on crops wrecked by violent invading adventurers. Analyzing the crisis carefully, Seer suggests donating the stored grain as emergency relief, charging a super low price for just a fraction of the batch. Hugging her inseparable teddy bear, the girl faces a mental conflict, guessing that the farmers might not have enough coins to actually buy it. Guiding his students' logic, the teacher carefully introduces the clever administrative concept of the classic grain loan system. Very practically, he teaches her that farmers borrow the supplies with tiny interest rates and clear the debt during the next harvest season. Super proud, the mentor highlights that this smart move fixes the people's hunger without dealing massive economic blows to the fortress's vault. The kid celebrates the brilliant strategy right as the maid Leia asks for permission to come in and interrupts the impromptu lesson. The worker lets them know the afternoon snack is served, making the young lord bounce with joy as she tries to guess if the mystery food is her beloved pudding. To clear up the menu mix-up, the servant reveals the choice was the fan-favorite strawberry cake, making the girl even more hyped. While walking toward the exit, Seer notices the master is still stuck in his chair and freezes in the hallway, asking what is wrong. With incredible cuteness, the ruler demands the human join the snack and share that rare break time right by her side. The maid throws both hands over her face, completely stunned, wondering if the little lord really wants to share the delicious dessert. Very confused by the staff's massive reaction, the guy realizes his student ignored the strict formal titles and his absolute rule of never sharing plates. Blinded by the craving to eat the hyped cake, the little girl sprints down the long royal hall demanding her beloved teacher hurry up. Walking patiently right behind the energetic student, Ning concludes with satisfaction that he finally locked in the stubborn ruler's genuine affection. In that brief moment of peace, the busy butler politely blocks the human's path to drop off some new mail. The veteran advisor hands over an official-looking envelope, reporting that the message was sent straight from Ruler Citri's turf. Reading the papers, the guy finds out all the offensive prep is totally done and considers that afternoon to be even more spectacular. Way out of that peaceful castle, a massive brute punches the wall after being told that the bold neighboring majesty just declared war. The strong Lord Andromalius furiously declares that the rival woman has lost whatever sanity she had left for trying to pull off a completely suicidal military push. Ignoring the warnings from his own advisors, the horned guy swears the rival is just a fool relying on someone else's clout. One of the strategists jumps into the raging argument, pointing out the huge chance that the enemy is hiding a trump card to justify such a risky invasion. The blonde-haired advisor informs the commanders in the room that recent rumors have already confirmed the shady alliance between the two lower floors. Backing up his warning, the subordinate reports that scouts noticed Her Majesty Citri making constant secret visits to Seer's neighboring domain. Andromalius thinks the whole conspiracy is super pathetic and bursts out laughing, mocking the little lord, but chokes on his joke when reminded of the loyal sword's strength. The blonde informant dives deeper into the alarming reports and mentions the dark tales, painting the lower turf's new military mentor as an absolute freak of nature. Consumed by rage, the hostile ruler totally doubts any elite demon would waste their time agreeing to lead that broke floor. Gritting his teeth, the Horned Lord accepts that the annoying influence of the masked strategist fueled the alliance, making a crushing payback necessary. Pitching a tactical sweep, the advisor claims a brutal strike with every available troop will easily wipe out the weak enemy's defense line. Next, the informant asks for permission to sneak up and whisper a crazy powerful battle strategy right into his angry master's ear. Hooked by the sheer evil of the suggested plan, the leader instantly greenlights the move and swears to wipe out the arrogant bugs who dared to challenge his empire. Scanning the ranks in the vast throne room, the horned guy notices the mercenary squads didn't show up to the crucial mandatory military meeting. Swallowed by massive resentment over the insubordination, he orders his elite soldiers to drag Aaron's raiders back to the castle right away. Before the battalions even move to carry out the order, a frantic guard bursts into the main hall, stumbling and screaming for help. The lackey throws himself roughly onto the floor in front of the ruler, shaking with absolute terror as the lord demands to know what the whole mess is about. Sweating buckets, the messenger reports in horror that Her Majesty Citri's strike squad just set up a barricade right at the door of Andromalius's palace. The horned guy shoots up from his seat, completely rattled by the absurd news, unable to make any sense of how the invasion snuck up right there. Out of his mind over the crazy insult, the furious leader crushes the armrest and finally links the border breach to the cowardly betrayal pulled off by the mercenaries. The advisor tells the lord to give the immediate order, warning that the forces are already gathered to crush the enemy. The soldiers scream, demanding the demise of the foolish ruler Citri and the traitor Aaron. With that, Andromalius orders all troops to push forward and sweep away those arrogant idiots once and for all. Meanwhile, the teacher puts a piece of armor on the little lord, warning her that the night is dark and the gear could save her life. Picking the little girl up, The human promises to give her a slice of cake when they get back if she behaves well. The butler walks over asking about the commander, noting that the operation must have already started and they need to hurry. Saying goodbye, Neen lets him know they are heading out and receives wishes of good luck in the battle. Arriving in front of a massive portal, the teacher asks Vice Commander Varuna if all the prep work is completely done. The soldier confirms, explaining that Her Majesty Citri opened a temporary direct gateway to the 70th floor. One of the guards mutters under his breath that the master really is betting it all, getting nothing but the order to push forward. Holding the little girl in his arms, the teacher steps through the glowing portal without a single ounce of hesitation. Far away from there, a mysterious figure lands on the roof of the quiet castle, doubting the brain power of the residents. The leader of Andromalius's stealth strike squad realizes they left the fortress basically empty and promises to make them pay the price. He orders his special squad to push in and take out anyone who was left behind. Right away, the subordinates agree and leap from the roof straight toward the windows. On the other side of the portal, Varuna questions if it really was a good idea to leave the fortress completely empty. The soldier brings up the enemy's stealth strike squad, but the teacher replies he already knows the important part of the situation. Brimming with confidence, the human guarantees that kind of sneaky infiltration won't do them any good. At that exact moment, one of the intruders is violently thrown, smashing through the castle's window. The invader hits the stone floor brutally and just lies there knocked out. Seeing the scene, the enemy leader is totally baffled and tries to make sense of what is going on. The veteran butler emerges from the shadows adjusting his gloves and remarks that he doesn't recall inviting anybody over. Glaring at the invaders coldly, Kane demands to know who these people are. The teacher's words echo, explaining that there are things you can hide and others that are just impossible to cover up. Another spy gets tossed right out of the mansion, screaming in pain amidst the shattered glass. Maid Leia appears holding a spear and tells the butler that her area has been completely cleared out. Cecily also shows up tracking her targets, complaining only about the broken door, which makes the old advisor laugh at the situation. The cook arrives carrying an unconscious enemy and asks if everyone is okay after finding a rat in the kitchen. Trembling with fear, the leader of the assassins realizes that his elite group was completely wiped out by the staff. The mentor knew very well that the employees of that fortress were highly skilled warriors hand-picked in the past. Observing the organization, Varuna mentally admits that the human strategy is flawless and has to acknowledge his talent. The professor catches the soldier's attention, snapping the young man out of his daydreams in the middle of the snow. The little girl warns the vice commander that his loyalty shouldn't be directed at the mentor, but at her. The subordinate swears he will remember that and humbly asks for Her Majesty's orders. The little lord asks the human to act as a temporary leader, receiving immediate confirmation that he will gladly do so. Neen concludes that the commander must have already contacted the mercenaries and orders Varuna to provide immediate support on the front lines. When the student asks about their destination, the young man says they are going to meet the ruler Citri, making the girl celebrate. Far away, the heavy army advances while a warrior praises the mercenaries' confidence for getting so far without a hitch. Observing from the top of a siege tower, a soldier comments that the humans' terrifying strategies managed to recruit powerful figures. Her Majesty Citri warns her lackey that he must never lay a finger on the professor because one mistake would ruin their entire floor. The servant quickly agrees, listening to the woman reinforce that they should just do the job and collect the reward. A massive explosion destroys the enemy wall's gates, making Her Majesty praise the flashy opening of the attack. Inside the palace, Andromalius is furious, saying that this shouldn't be a war and swearing that just taking out the mercenaries won't be enough. A guard begs the lord to retreat, but the horned guy refuses the idea, ordering the invaders to come to him. Destroying everything around him, the ruler overflows with rage and promises he will eliminate everyone personally. The mercenary leader notices the furious lord's presence and mocks the enemy's punctual arrival. The commander walks through the main hall next to Varuna and agrees that the timing was perfect. The horned guy yells at his guards, ordering everyone to advance to welcome the unwanted guests. Drawing her sword quickly, Elraza mockingly questions if this is how the floor treats its visitors. The enemy ruler accuses the invaders of being full of themselves just because of the loyal sword's support and promises to tear everyone apart. The warrior advances with a swift attack, stating that he'll have to try doing that in his next life. The weapons clash brutally, creating a spark of energy in the center of the hall. Andromalius swings a huge hammer with brute force, trying to crush his opponent against the ground. Defending the woman's strike with ease, he calls her an arrogant fool for talking so much trash. The Horned Lord announces that he will personally test the commander's supposed combat skills. Assuming her battle stance, the warrior waits while the opponent tells her to bring it on. The enemy ruler unleashes another devastating attack with his hammer towards the woman. Dodging with great agility, she hears her rival admit that her speed is the reason she always managed to get away. Right then, Varuna sneaks up behind the Lord, grabbing the enemy and throwing him forcefully to the ground. The commander's eyes widen in complete surprise at her ally's unexpected interference. Getting up quickly, the enemy ruler shows total excitement and declares that the fight just got interesting. A massive snake appears next to the Lord, making the warrior step back in shock as she recognizes the creature as a hydra. The scaly beast opens its fang-filled mouth wide and advances swiftly, trying to bite the commander. From a nearby balcony, Her Majesty Citri praises the atmosphere of war while the professor evaluates the invasion's progress. The woman questions if the swords will be able to handle the monster, and the human confirms victory as long as he gets her help. Reaching his hands out to the little girl, the ally views the child confused about what's going on. The young man tries to hand the little ruler over to Her Majesty's arms, warning that bringing the girl into battle would be too risky. Hugging the mentor's neck, the student refuses to be left behind and protests, wanting to watch the fight up close. Suddenly, the professor's expression turns completely serious, and he interrupts the conversation, asking for silence. Observing magical sparks covering his own hand, the human realizes that this mysterious aura shouldn't be present there. He warns the child that Commander El Raza might be in danger, and because of that, he needs to intervene right away. Promising to be right back, the young man leaps from the balcony in the blink of an eye, taking off like lightning toward the castle. Her Majesty loses sight of the human instantly, completely paralyzed as she measures the absurd level of strength of that being. For a second, the woman considers using the girl, but the professor's voice echoes in her mind, warning that this was an alliance test. The mentor's voice demands that the little lord be treated with the utmost respect, making the ally bow obediently, accepting the order. Meanwhile, Her Majesty Citri carries a little student and asks if she really likes that teddy bear so much. Clinging to the toy with a giant smile, the little girl makes a cute noise, leaving the woman curious about why it had to be a whale. Far away from that peaceful scene, a guard is violently struck in the middle of the battle's chaos. Sensing the imminent danger, Vice Commander Varuna looks back, startled. Unable to react in time, the soldier takes a direct hit from a brutal strike. With the devastating impact, the young man is thrown against the wall and falls to his knees. Watching the carnage, Andromalius mocks the blood-covered mercenaries while hearing an enemy tell him to zip it. At that moment, the monstrous hydra attacks Rin relentlessly, making the warrior realize that this is no normal creature. Being crushed against the ground by its absurd strength, the commander notices the beast's power matches that of a high-level lord. Completely cornered, she closes her eyes and apologizes to her ruler, accepting that this is the end. However, a giant dark aura takes over the hall, making the warrior open her eyes in complete shock. In a fraction of a second, the massive hydra is smashed into the ground, leaving the Horned Lord confused about who just arrived. Walking calmly through the dust, Neen calls the enemy by name and offers a single chance to surrender. The hostile ruler breaks into a cold sweat facing the surprise attack, trembling as he feels the pressure of that insane mana. Staring at the human's menacing silhouette, the Lord realizes the energy directly compares to the number 1 demon's. Trying to hide his panic, Andromalius praises the opponent's strength and asks why someone so strong joined such a pathetic faction. Covered by his dense magic, the human just ignores the comment and coldly replies that the enemy talks too much. Desperate, the Horned Lord tries to bribe the invader, offering money, fame, and anything he desires if he switches sides. Sweating nonstop, the ruler begs the young man to just say what he wants so they can reach a deal. With a dark look, the mentor reveals he wants the highest seat a demon lord can achieve. The enemy gets annoyed, saying that's impossible at his level, guessing that's why Neen targeted Seer's broke floor. Turning a deaf ear, the professor readies a spell at his fingertips and warns he has absolutely no intention of forgiving his rival. In a final breath of arrogance, the opposing leader claims that in war, tricks don't matter as long as you win. With a devastating and instant strike, the mentor cuts the lord down, ensuring he doesn't need any forgiveness. As the dust settles in the ruined hall, the human raises his voice and declares the war is over. He orders all enemy soldiers to drop their swords as their ruler has just fallen in battle. Completely in shock at seeing their defeated leader, the guards surrender while the winner promises to spare the lives of those who don't resist. Far away, Her Majesty Citri notices the invasion is over and concludes that such absurd speed makes perfect sense coming from the human. Right after, the little lord cheers up in the woman's lap and announces she managed to hear her dear professor's voice. Back at the ruined castle, Commander Ren bows, apologizing for her failure, but Nin tells her not to be too hard on herself. Still shaken, the warrior recalls the opponent's strength and realizes that aura belonged to those who ruled above the demonic realm. She gets frustrated over having memory gaps that prevent her from recognizing the creature, noting that this event never happened in the old tales. Interrupting her thoughts, the professor informs the two subordinates that, officially, the enemy lord was defeated by Her Majesty Citri. The human orders Varuna to take care of the mercenaries and clean up the place while he goes to check on his student. Curious about the little girl's disappearance, the warrior asks about her whereabouts and finds out the child was left waiting with the allied ruler. The commander panics, learning the child is alone with Citri, but the mentor guarantees Her Majesty won't do anything foolish. Confident in his own warning, the young man says goodbye and vanishes in an instant using his terrifying speed. The warrior is left alone in the destroyed hallway, staring into the void, unable to believe what she just witnessed. At the Allied base, the lackey informs Citri about the total surrender of the enemy troops, leaving the woman intrigued by how fast it ended. Suddenly, the little lord stands up all excited, announcing the professor's arrival, while the confused majesty admits she doesn't sense a thing. The human enters the place walking normally and asks if they are having fun, receiving an enthusiastic confirmation from the student. The ally's jaw drops at his lightning-fast return, hearing the guy say that the detailed reports will arrive shortly. Without much ceremony, Mean tosses a heavy package into the woman's lap, leaving the ruler confused about what's inside. Noticing she was holding the defeated lord's helm, she gets startled when the professor tells her to take all the credit for the takedown. With a smirk, the human just justifies the political move by saying the two floors are now great allies. The mentor announces he's going home with the girl and asks for the spoils to be split equally, leaving the ally suspicious of his smile. At the old castle on the lower floor, loud noises echo across the silent facade right after the night attacks end. The old butler Kane hammers the fortress's main door, trying to fix the huge mess left by the assassins. The professor enters the hall holding hands with his student, greeting the lackey and immediately noticing the mess at the entrance. Laughing at the situation, the advisor explains they had some unwanted guests and that he ended up miscalculating his own strength while welcoming them. Pleased to see them both safe, the butler sincerely congratulates the human on successfully conquering the enemy floor. Remaining humble, the young man claims that was just one step forward and that now they'll be busy preparing to move castles. The little girl happily agrees, but leaves the lackey confused when she reveals the mentor plans to hand over ownership of the enemy palace to Citri. While walking down the hallway, Kane questions why the professor gave up the credit for the victory, risking leaving them at a total disadvantage. The human explains that taking the castle means claiming the conquest, confirming he will pass this responsibility to the ruler on paper. He justifies the decision by revealing that, right now, their finances are still very weak, needing capital and resources much more than an empty title. The strategy focused on letting the ruler deal with the political fallout of the invasion, while their floor simply gathers strength in silence. The little lord completes the thought, stating that now the ally is officially responsible for any diplomatic issues in the new territory. Nian approves of the girl's read of the situation and assures that the ally took the risk, knowing exactly what she was getting into. The butler finally understands the professor's brilliant mind and listens as he decrees that from this moment on, the focus will be the young lord's education. Walking up the massive staircase, the mentor lists the next steps, starting with the immediate replacement of the fortress's outdated equipment. He focuses on creating a proper circulation system and the need to find out who was funding the enemy lord from the shadows. Curious about the flawless execution of the war plan, the advisor asks how the young man was so sure he could recruit the mercenaries. Holding the student, Nian confides to the child that it was a secret in-game event, but answers out loud to Kane that he just got lucky. The old lackey reads between the lines and reaffirms he suspected the young man's genius from the start, ensuring he must be kept close. Climbing the final steps under the warm sunlight, the human asks Kane to entirely handle the broken door and gets an immediate confirmation. The professor feels relieved that the immediate crisis is over, stating that now the little girl will finally have the time she needs to learn how to truly rule. Receiving a boop on the nose, the little student hears her mentor say with pride that she is the one and only true owner of that entire empire. Welcomed by his sincere words, the child states how much she loves being taught by him, pointing out that even the bear agrees with the lessons. Caught up in the girl's sweetness, Ning smiles with satisfaction and thanks her for the trust, certain he chose the perfect path to protect Seer. Enjoying the pleasant moment, the human suggests going ahead with the paperwork while she rests, but the little girl flails around, rejecting the idea. The little lord scolds the professor, using the maid's advice about always resting properly after working hard. Puffing her cheeks in a pout, the student demands he sleeps next to her, getting a nervous laugh from the guy who swears he isn't sleepy. Giving in to the cute whim, Nin mentally decides he'll just put the girl to bed and then sneak out to finish his pending work. The professor agrees to his favorite ruler's order, leaving the child absolutely radiant at the prospect of an afternoon nap by his side. Maid Leah greets the lord and the little queen, who just returned to their quarters. The human takes the perfect opportunity and asks the servant to bring a hot cup of tea for the girl. Before she leaves, the professor gets her attention and asks with concern if she got hurt anywhere. The horned woman blushes slightly, denying any injuries. Walking away down the hallway, Leah realizes the mentor had already figured everything out about the attack on the castle. In bed, the human tucks the student in, asking if she's going to sleep, hugging the teddy bear. Wishing her a good night, he is surprised by the little girl demanding he sleeps there too. The little lord pouts in annoyance and pulls on his sleeve to stop him from leaving. Giving in to the cute request, Neen lies down and decides to stay by the child's side at least until she falls asleep. Far away, Lord Dantalion from the 69th floor questions in disbelief if Andromalius was really taken out by Citri. General Leonard deduces that the victory was only possible thanks to Her Majesty's alliance with the 72nd floor. Minister Albus concludes their territory will be the next target and warns they need to prepare well. Without better options, the ruler decides to send a letter proposing an alliance with the Caribia from the 68th floor. The leader acknowledges the fallen rival's brute strength and fears being the next victim if he just stands by. Determined to act fast, he orders the letter to be prepped, claiming their neighbor will have no reason to refuse. Outside the room, a voice announces that all preparations have been completed. Walking in with a tray, Maid Leah lets out a surprised sigh seeing the scene. She notes with relief that both the professor and the little lord ended up falling asleep from exhaustion. Snuggled next to a student, the human rests, hoping the little girl's dreams are peaceful. Days later, Meen meets with Her Majesty, Citri under the moonlight, and complains about the delay in splitting the assets. The woman sighs in exhaustion, guaranteeing the territory and troops were divided fairly, leaving only the loot left. The mentor offers the ally to pick her spoils first, since they handed the enemy castle over to her. He warns that Her Majesty will be busy managing the new lands, but demands she comes to train at least once a week. Annoyed by the nagging, the ruler reminds him she is also a demon lord and asks him to stop worrying. Alone in his office, the guy focuses on the urgency of cleaning up the war's mess and decides to lay down some guidelines. The sound of knocking echoes from the large double doors, and the human promptly allows entry. The fox maid Cecily runs in with tears in her eyes, warning they'll need to cancel the little ruler's class. Desperate, the servant reveals the girl has a fever, making the mentor slam the desk in complete shock. The professor gets anxious, remembering the child was perfectly healthy the day before. With a heavy heart, he wonders if he pushed her routine too hard or if the battlefield caused this. The foxmaid scolds the professor, explaining it's normal for kids that age to get sick out of nowhere. Neen takes a deep breath and agrees with the servant, realizing the little lord is still just a fragile little girl. He asks the woman to take good care of Seer while the girl rests for the next few days. Alone in the room, the guy covers his face, frustrated for forgetting that this world is real life and not just a game. Determined, the mentor decides to quickly wrap up all his paperwork so he can check on his student's condition. Entering the ruler's room, the human carries some stuffed animals and asks how she's feeling. The child's face lights up with a radiant expression as she receives the new toys and thanks him joyfully. Excited, the professor uses his magic to make dozens of other cute plushies appear out of thin air around the room. Being crushed by an actual mountain of plushies, the girl nervously asks him to stop. Holding a stuffed bunny, the guy freezes, completely confused by the sudden interruption. The little girl goes back to sleep, mumbling about plushies, leaving the mentor curious about her dream. Relieved, the human touches the child's forehead and confirms the high fever has finally started to break. While Neen works by the bedside, the student wakes up calling for him, and he quickly apologizes for the noise. The professor gently pets the girl's hair and admits he was extremely worried about her health. The little girl asks to look at the documents with him, but the mentor politely refuses, demanding she rests for today. The professor warns that her recovery is the priority, reminding her that she'll be sad if she misses out on tomorrow's pudding. Wishing sweet dreams to the little ruler, the human says goodbye with an affectionate look. Sometime later, the butler Kane interrupts the young man, bringing the inventory report of the war's loot. The lackey asks if he's looking for anything specific, and the mentor confirms there was a must-have item on the 70th floor. Neen recalls that magical equipment is essential to boost growth efficiency and should never be ignored. Crossing out items on the document, he zeroes in on a specific hidden piece he only managed to discover after playing exhaustively. The guy reflects in awe about how the developers hid such a valuable item in the early stages. The human hands the list to the advisor, ordering him to secure those items for their side without fail. Reading the paper, the old butler's eyes widen in surprise at the professor's unusual request. Kane questions if the marking is correct, hearing Neen state they'll go get it personally if Her Majesty agrees. The document reveals a request for an unidentified broken sword, making the lackey finally understand the mission. Already in the loot warehouse, Seer is enchanted by a box full of colorful and shiny crystals. The little girl points excitedly to another golden chest, amazed by the glow of the plundered treasures. Walking through the massive storage accompanied by the commander and the student, the mentor spots exactly what he was looking for. Impressed by the absurd amount of items, the professor praises the place's wealth and confirms Her Majesty cooperated peacefully. A soldier stumbles over his words, trying to salute the little ruler, who clumsily returns the greeting. The guard presents the special box containing the item the human demanded be treated with the utmost care. The professor inspects the damaged object and praises the mercenary's flawless work in recovering the piece. He remembers that this weapon has the highest attack power of the early game and drastically accelerates magical efficiency. Holding the rusty blade, the mentor draws the little girl's curiosity, and she asks what it is. The guy reveals the broken sword is a gift for her, swearing he knows exactly where to find the missing gem. Mean suggests they finish checking the warehouse before fixing it, leaving the commander curious about the weapon's final result. With eyes shining with expectation, the little student excitedly guesses that the sword will become incredibly shiny. The warrior questions if she should call some miners, but the human declines, explaining that this repair requires a different method. The little girl has fun pointing at large armors, while the professor orders them to be sent to equip the troops. Fascinated by the place's riches, the lord examines giant green crystals, claiming they are very pretty. The mentor calmly asks if anything in particular caught her eye, making the girl gasp in surprise. She tries to hide her desire, but the human pets her head and reminds her that everything there already belongs to her by right. The professor picks up an ornate crown full of red jewels, joking that her royal blood really speaks louder. Later, the guide leads his student to the entrance of an abandoned mine on the 70th floor, revealing that the sword's pieces are deep inside. Walking along the tracks of the abandoned mine, the professor guarantees he knows the exact location of the pieces, stating that forks in the road won't be a problem. Arriving at the spot, the butler notices there's nothing there, but the little girl fully trusts her mentor will find it quickly. Confirming his student's expectation, Nin starts rummaging through a pile of rocks looking for the hidden item. Soon he finds a glowing red crystal and announces he found what he needed. Holding the rusty hilt, the young lord asks curiously if that's a real sword, hearing from the guy that it isn't yet. Taking a few more steps, the human warns that their work doesn't end there. Using his ancient magic, the professor destroys the rocks, advising that now only the most important part is left. With a single magical push, he breaks the stone wall, revealing a secret passage. The mentor clears the path and spots huge double doors guarded by a statue, noting they still have one gate to pass through. Picking the little girl up, the guy says he'll carry her from here on out since they just need to get through that entrance now. Suddenly, yellow eyes glow in the dark, calling them intruders, making Neen comment about a minor obstacle in the way. The massive gargoyle statue comes to life, blocking the door, declaring they cannot pass. Ignoring the threat, the professor tells his student to take a good look since gargoyles are nearly extinct, leaving the girl amazed to see a talking monster. The stone beast gets annoyed by his laid-back attitude and yells, telling the human to shut his mouth. Immediately, the guy shoots a menacing glare, coldly ordering the creature not to dare interrupt Seer's class. To assert dominance, the mentor summons a gigantic spectral whale that roars, scaring the stone creature. The gargoyle panics and bows quickly, calling him Lord, while the little ruler thinks a monster that big might be useful. The professor orders the beast to wait there because he'll be back for it, receiving a desperate confirmation in return. Entering the secret room, the two observe a glowing altar, leaving the child completely in awe. Without wasting time, the human tosses the rusty hilt and the red crystal toward the pedestal to initiate the repair. With a simple gesture, the mentor uses his magic to merge the parts perfectly in the center of the altar. An intense light illuminates the whole room as the weapon regains its true form. The blood sword floats completely restored and gleaming, making the student praise the blade's beauty. The guy states that this is her gift, confirming it in a gentle tone when the girl asks in disbelief if it's really hers. Radiating joy, the young lord lifts the glowing sword and thanks the professor with a lot of enthusiasm. The system confirms the weapon has absurd stats for attack power and vitality for whoever equips it. Back at the castle, the little girl shows the gift to the butler, who is confused by the choice, while the human declares the start of sword training. Kane notices the stone monster right behind them and questions its origin, while Nim suggests the name Arculum for their scared new ally. The lackey points out that the creature won't be able to protect the fortress because it's too big, getting a nod of agreement from the professor. Analyzing the new guard, the mentor admits he's a bit problematic, but bets he'll be perfect for dealing with humans. The butler agrees with the idea, assessing that the gargoyle will be the ideal defense for the portal zone. Taking the cue, the human threatens to turn the monster into scrap rubble if he turns out to be useless, ensuring the creature's fearful obedience. With that matter settled, the professor changes his tone and announces they will discuss the new intelligence report inside his office. Later on, a troubling piece of intelligence reveals that Lords Dantalion and Tecarabia have finally made contact. The advisor confirms that the alliance between the 68th and 69th floors will cause a huge problem for them. The mentor reflects that they don't have the forces for a direct confrontation, but they can't just stand still either, concluding there's only one option left. Asked about a plan, the guide claims they are going to shake the foundation of Dantalion's power, even knowing the enemy is strong and smart. Kane agrees with the difficulty, recalling that the enemy faction is famous for its merchants and the belief that the economy drives the floor forward. The human asks what merchants value the most, concluding that destroying trust would bring down the rival faction on its own. Understanding the logic, the old lackey points out that this trust was built over years and asks how they can tear it down quickly. With a calculating look, Neen replies dryly that he never said he'd do it in an instant. Walking over to the window, the professor explains that strengthening Seer's foundations will take 5 years, so they will sabotage the enemy's economy slowly. He reveals he'll use the exact same strategy he used in the game, becoming the rival's main commercial competition. The guy decrees they'll do business on the 70th floor, making the butler realize he's going to use Her Majesty's Citchery again. Kane fears the allied ruler will refuse the risk, but the human guarantees the offer will be too tempting to ignore. Astute, the mentor states the key to success will be selling something merchants would do anything to get their hands on. Walking out of the room with confidence, he promises to commercialize an unprecedented product in the demonic realm. Elsewhere, on the outskirts of the Holy Nation, humans actively gossip about a recent rumor. Inside a local tavern, adventurers comment that there are hardly any demonic guards left protecting the magic portal's entrance. Seeing a golden opportunity, a swordsman proposes invading the place to hunt monsters and get rich by selling expensive horns. A pink-haired girl agrees excitedly, revealing she knows the creature's habitat and that it'll be easy to make a fortune. Determined to get rich, the warrior stands up excitedly, declaring that the group will depart for the demonic realm immediately. Walking toward the portal, the group notices the place is much more crowded than usual, confirming the rumor's truth. Suddenly, a mysterious man taps the warrior's shoulder, asking to join the expedition. The brute, armed with an axe, introduces himself alongside a nun, wanting to take advantage of the info on the monster's whereabouts. Realizing the duo is high class, the swordsman accepts the deal out of fear of starting trouble, being praised for his smart decision. With the team assembled, the axe warrior leads the march through the portal toward the enemy dimension. Crossing the desert of the demonic world, the rookies chat excitedly about the lack of resistance on the way. Following the trail, the brute announces they are almost there, while the swordsman finds the total absence of defenders weird. The warrior theorizes that the monsters abandoned that specific floor, but quickly stops walking, telling everyone to hide. Hiding behind large rocks, the humans observe a herd of monsters grazing peacefully just ahead. The rookie suggests they start the hunt right away, but the axe warrior interrupts, offering a new proposal. The veteran demands to keep all the valuable horns, making the young man angry since that was the only goal of the trip. Gripping his weapon's handle, the brute warns in a dark tone that the kid has a bright future ahead of him. He threatens the swordsman openly, telling the boy to obey if he wants to make it out of there in one piece. Aware of the blackmail, the rookie grinds his teeth in frustration for falling into the advanced duo's trap. Arrogant, the warrior tells the kid to do the dirty work, admitting he never planned on actually fighting. Right then, a colossal crash hits the ground nearby, kicking up a terrifying cloud of dust. The adventurers lose their balance from the impact, desperately thinking they are in the middle of an earthquake. Holding his axe tightly, the veteran gets annoyed by the noise, thinking the prey will run away from the scare. Emerging from the smoke, the castle's massive gargoyle glares at the invaders, announcing it finally found its target. The experienced warrior loses all his posture, breaking into a cold sweat as he recognizes the legendary creature in front of him. The young man screams for them to run away immediately, but seeing that the brute is frozen with fear, tells the rest of the group to leave him behind. Getting ready to run, the rookie looks around trying to get the pink-haired girl's attention, but she won't move. The young girl trembles in terror, unable to take her eyes off the monster, murmuring in disbelief about the true strength of the Guardians. Kneeling on the ground, an enemy knight asks his commander for new combat instructions. With a cold and focused look, Rin gives a direct order, warning that there is only one single rule for the mission. The warrior decrees that all invaders must be captured alive, while her troops surround the group with a magic net. Trapped in an iron cage, one of the adventurers watches the situation, completely shocked that they aren't being eliminated on the spot. Faced with this unexpected scenario, the guy tries to understand why the fearsome inhabitants are sparing their lives. Back at the castle office, the butler reports they captured almost 300 prisoners, but the professor considers that number too low. Kane admits the continuous invasion turned the region into a very lucrative hunting ground thanks to the new alliance and the stone gargoyle. Neen recalls that showing mercy to outsiders in the original game always went wrong, swearing he'll do whatever it takes for the perfect ending. The commander points out that the plan to lure enemies worked so well that even the floor's own population started to worry about the captures. Understanding the risk to the young lord's reputation, the mentor notes the drop in traps and confirms they still need to gather more prisoners. With the demand for supplies still high, the human decides it's the exact moment to change the operation scheme. He calmly asks if the commander knows any allied manipulator, pointing out that mind control magic would solve the situation. Giving a confident smile, the guy decrees that the final stage of the plan will make the prey come into their territory on their own free will. Far away in the human city of Soder, a guild receptionist announces that the dimensional borders remain closed by higher orders. Frustrated by the restrictions, a warrior complains about the mysterious disappearance of so many people in the region and the useless portal blockade. The establishment's door is suddenly thrown wide open by a desperate explorer begging for help. Panting, he says he just barely escaped by luck and reveals the otherworld's guardians are capturing all humans alive. Hearing the terrifying tale, a healer falls into despair over her lost friends, but the local leader's heavy footsteps shut down the commotion. The guild master approaches the survivor and coldly asks if he found out the reason for these mysterious arrests. Still sweating cold from the scare, the rookie stutters that he didn't have time to find out anything. making the older man impatient. Grant steps forward, suspicious of the story, finding it extremely unlikely that such a low-level adventurer made it back from there in one piece. Analyzing the newcomer closely, the veteran focuses on the sound of his breathing and notices a peculiar detail about his accelerated heartbeat. He quickly realizes that those uneven heartbeats are the trademark of any liar trying to hide something. Noticing that the boy's heart suddenly calmed down unnaturally, the leader smells the foul stench of sorcery lingering in the air. The master soon deduces that the kid suffered heavy brainwashing, getting a sinister smile from the fake survivor in response. Completely dropping his disguise, the spy lunges at an impressive speed, using a hidden dagger to slit the veteran's throat. Unfazed by the ambush, Grant draws his own sword at the very last second and blocks the treacherous attack with a devastating slash. The infiltrated lackey falls to the ground, defeated, while the commander sheaths his weapon, ordering them to spread a warning forbidding any rescue missions. The order tries to prevent a larger disaster, but a panting messenger bursts into the hall, interrupting the official portal closure. Annoyed by the breach of protocol, the master turns his head, demanding to know what calamity justifies that desperate intrusion. Trembling with nerves, the soldier reveals that the guilds from other regions have decided to take drastic action against the captures. In the northern city, hundreds of warriors raise their weapons, hyped for the chance to start a true vengeful massacre. Driven by the promise of total annihilation, the furious battalions begin to march in full force through the forbidden access portals. Meanwhile, in the holy capital, the religious leader calls for the end of the evil beasts and blesses his troops' divine crusade. Days before all this chaos broke out, the professor received confirmation that the manipulated humans were already positioned at their targets. He had ordered the strategic dispatch of the last group to that specific city, avoiding alerting the powerful local guild leader. The mentor remembered the game well, when Grants would always show up as an absurdly problematic obstacle to face. Anticipating the enemy's cunning, the entire trap was meticulously set to ensure the veteran would only discover the truth when it was too late. Returning to the present in the border desert, the commander observes the enemy hordes and praises her lord's terrifying mind. Varuna entirely agrees, reminding his colleague that their legion's main mission now is to secure the profit planned by the professor. With the human armies marching neatly across the scorching sand, the officer duo orders the colossal gargoyle to give them a warm welcome. Soon, one of the vanguard knights halts his steps as he notices the dense shadow that suddenly blotted out the region's sun. The thunderous impact of the beast hitting the ground sends rocks flying everywhere and paralyzes the front line with pure dread. Following its strict orders, the monstrous beast roars, imposing an overwhelming magical presence, and decrees the elimination of everyone there. Capitalizing on the despair caused by the stone monster, Rin commands an immediate volley of fire against the openings in the Human Alliance's formation. Immediately, the rows of demonic cannons scattered along the battle's flank are loaded with special ammo. The command fires a massive rain of projectiles streaking across the sky and landing smack in the middle of the enemy tactical groupings. The equipment explodes, releasing dozens of sticky webs, impossible to tear because they're made of special spider silk. Keeping his eyes on the prize, an experienced crusader warrior uses his sword's brute force and cuts the tough material to free his squad. This overwhelming display of power makes the infantry cheer, celebrating the rescue by the famous high-class commander. Destroying obstacles with clean cuts, the old leader rallies his men to form an escape corridor through the isolated trenches. Observing the stubborn resistance from afar, the commander notes the monster won't be able to handle the suppression and decides to act. Confident in his own power, the vice commander draws his magic spear and happily volunteers to take out the pesky rats. Varuna swears he won't fall for the same trick from the past and immediately releases the formidable Asura clan's dark energy before making contact. Nearby, the veteran knight freezes in place, feeling his survival instinct screaming in the face of the terrifying presence that just appeared. In a flash, the huge, diabolical silhouette strikes with a devastating blow that shatters his shield and sends the leader flying. Covered in an intimidating purple aura, the lackey glares at the trembling soldiers, calling them all despicable worms. He steps firmly on the defeated human to prove that the Crusader group's hope for survival is permanently over. Terror sweeps through the rest of the rearguard troops, who drop their gear in the sand and run away, desperately begging for their lives. laughing at the enemy's cowardice. The formidable demon unleashes his squad to have fun hunting down the loose targets until none are left. Back in the safety of the castle, Nin praises the massive damage dealt without spending resources, congratulating his servants on the resounding success. The mentor personally thanks the bravery of the newcomers, highlighting the commendable effort in the 5th Legion's first external mission. The duo of officers bows, revering their superior's immense wisdom, and asks for permission to withdraw with the rest of the troops. Wrapping up the day's work with peace of mind, the guy walks over to his student's throne to see how she was enjoying her special pudding. Serious again, the strategist orders Kane to sort out only the 200 most profitable humans and prepare the free return of the rest. The advisor takes off his glasses, stunned by the waste of valuable hostages, fearing his master is trying to force an absurd negotiation. With a confident smile taking over his face, the professor guarantees he will drain every last coin from the 3 rival political leaders. He knows very well that the first major hurdle in this diplomacy will be facing the enormous religious state governed by the Pope's strict dogmas. The second target at the bargaining table is the ruthless leader of the Eastern Empire, who dictates continental laws and hates showing any sign of weakness. Lastly, the demand will threaten the isolated leader of the Northern Wall, who survives the harsh winters by training the best patrols ever seen. Nin recognizes their threat, but warns that refusing the ransom is now impossible, since they lost way too many armies in the humiliating invasion. The little ruler doesn't understand the plan's machinations, but listens as the professor nails down that the blame for this chaos falls entirely on the aggressor nations. He points out that any refusal to save innocent lives would completely destroy the oppressed population's little remaining trust in their so-called kings. The Lord questions the usefulness of all this morality, and the guy pets her head, teaching her the gigantic importance of controlling your own base. Convinced by Nin's clever and dangerous manipulation, the butler happily accepts the orders and leaves to arrange the selection of the products. The little demon lord asks out of curiosity what the professor plans to do with the blacksmiths. Nin calmly replies they are going to produce something to sell. She questions if learning from humans will actually turn a profit. The mentor agrees that it probably will, while the ransom negotiations are already starting to echo. Far away, the emperor of the Bismarck Empire, Claude, comments while sitting comfortably on his throne that this is the first time in his life he's received such an audacious letter from the demons. He always thought that place was just a playground for adventurers, but realizes the situation has changed, since mindless beasts would have just declared war. Hearing the report, the bearded advisor immediately asks what the exact amount the enemies are demanding for the prisoner's ransom is. The ruler reveals they are asking for a lot of gold, silver, and iron for each group of 20 people. The advisor notes the demand per head is absurdly high. A blonde noble gets angry, thinking they are being underestimated, and suggests punishment. However, Marquis Everett argues they must accept the demands for the sake of the citizens. Everett points out that the invasion was the guild's fault and they have no reason to attack, but the blonde snaps back furiously, asking if they even need reasons against demons. Keeping his cool, the Marquis explains that it matters a lot because the Empire has no idea what the enemy territory's true military strength actually is right now. He highlights that several adventurers took part in the invasion, possessing the strength of official knights, and even so, not a single one of them managed to escape. Furious at the cowardice, the blonde noble slams his fist on the table in indignation, questioning if the Empire is really going to stoop low and bow to demons over this. The Marquis warns that if the people find out the Emperor abandoned his citizens to die, it will be impossible to control the population's fury. Grinding his teeth in hatred, Claude decides to send a response accepting the deal and orders them to gather intelligence, swearing to pay back this humiliation in the future. Back at the castle, Nin announces that 3 of the great human nations have already agreed to negotiate the ransom, relieved since there was a real chance of refusal. He hands a document to Kane, ordering him to take the prisoners to the kill zone tomorrow and pass on a specific message to the human envoys. The guy wraps up the topic by warning that if the last nation doesn't respond by the end of the week, they'll handle the rest of the hostages their own way. Meanwhile, in the castle courtyard, several gathered blacksmiths gossip in confusion about why the demon lord summoned even workers from other floors. The chatter is interrupted by heavy footsteps echoing through the area, making the monsters break a cold sweat as they notice the highest authorities approaching. The crowd is shocked to see Seer and Citri walking side by side, also recognizing the imposing presence of Neen right behind the two rulers. Taking the lead, Citri welcomes the artisans from all floors, knowing very well they are curious about the reason for this gathering. She pulls back a cloth, revealing a huge rack full of equipment, ordering all blacksmiths to pay close attention to what's on the platform. The old goblins are amazed by the arsenal's quality, asking where they got that and praising the blades as true works of art. Neen reveals that all those swords were confiscated from the adventurers. At this, a blacksmith spits on the ground in disgust for having praised human trash. The Lord ignores the tantrum and decrees their mission is to analyze that gear and recreate everything with the same excellent quality. Offended, the old artisan yells, asking if their work is so inferior that they need to copy humans. She replies it's good that he understands. Taking over, Neen tells them to start immediately, demanding they stop wasting time and resources forging mediocre weapons in the castle. The goblin revolts against the mentor's disrespect, finding it absurd to be insulted like that. Neen maintains his cold posture, stating that it's just a fact. To prove his point and end the argument, the professor decides to ask a practical question regarding the pride of that grumpy old worker. He picks up one of the confiscated human blades from the rack and grips it firmly, facing the group of artisans who are still doubting the truth. Pointing the weapon forward, Neen asks what would happen if they clashed a sword made by demons against that superior human tool. The guy warns he doesn't want a cheap copy, ordering them to study the invading weapon structure and use that knowledge to forge their own. Seeing the practical benefit, a young goblin steps to the front of the group, ignoring the prejudice of his elders, and volunteers to study the human work. Walking up with his hammer, Doomgrim warns that the analysis will take time because he doesn't know the process. Neen guarantees time and resources won't be an issue. The professor turns to the two lords and suggests appointing the brave rookie as the operations leader. With no objections from the bosses, he hands the job to the goblin. To make the promotion official, the human tosses a badge to Doomgrim, ensuring that gives him absolute authority over the other blacksmiths there. The older artisan freaks out, demanding to know why a rookie got the position instead of him, but is immediately silenced by the strategist's cold glare. Neen strictly explains that a real leader takes initiative and assumes responsibility, calling the old man a coward for just standing around complaining. Applying pressure, he asks if the blacksmith is trying to defy the Lord's direct orders. The goblin trembles in terror, denying any rebellion. The mentor leaves a final warning for the whole courtyard, decreeing that anyone who ignores Doomgrim's orders will be committing treason against the two majesties. Dominated by a dark and terrifying aura, Neen warns that if anyone dares to hinder the weapon production, they shall be executed on the spot. Completely terrified by the crushing magical pressure, the old artisan kneels in front of everyone, calling himself a mere inferior blacksmith. He bows his head to the ground alongside the other envious veterans, swearing total devotion to fulfill the new leader's wishes without asking any more questions. Later in the office, Little Seer excitedly asks if she did well at the meeting. Neen pets her head, praising her posture, but the girl thinks it's not enough. Citri teases her ally, asking if she really needs that many compliments. The girl pouts while the professor agrees the work was great. Changing the subject, Nin refocuses on the new weapons venture, confirming he will officially register everything under Ruler Citri's name. Focused only on the gains, the woman crosses her arms and directly asks the strategist how the profits from that whole operation will be split. The guy calmly suggests splitting it down the middle, but she refuses right away, calling the offer a blatant robbery and threatening to cancel the deal. Indignant that he's using her name to profit, the Lord slams the table demanding respect, but ends up caving to Neen's bluff and lowers her asking price to 10%. The human calls his ally greedy, warning that if she takes that big of a cut, the supply of free weapons for her army will be cut off. Aware of the risks of a project that isn't even hers, Citri backs down frustrated and accepts a smaller share in exchange for keeping the constant arsenal flowing. Victorious in the bargain, Neen locks the ally's share at just 5%, ensuring the final amount will still yield an immense fortune for her. The demon grumbles that it's impossible to predict that before sales begin, admitting she still finds it hard to blindly trust his crazy promises. Even with one foot out the door, she decides to sign the contract, curiously asking if the castle's blacksmiths will really be able to copy the invaders' blades. Citri explains that for the lords, using weapons makes no sense, which caused the abandonment of research and left demons so far behind in blacksmithing. The professor agrees, but reminds her that a lord doesn't fight alone forever, making the troops' gear vital for the flora's survival. Showing they've already confiscated plenty of material for study, he places the document in her hands, guaranteeing the monsters will learn very fast. He teases the woman, saying she can still back out if she wants. She snaps back excitedly that she would never throw away a chance to get free weapons. Reading the fine print, the Lord freaks out upon realizing the profits and weaponry are just a cooperation fee and that she will take the fall if everything fails. Completely outsmarted in the sneaky negotiation, Her Majesty's eyes widen in fury at having to carry all the business's risk on her back, exuding a dark aura. The manipulator shows off his finger glowing with the magic of the sealed pact, reminding her that nothing in this world comes for free. Deep in the dungeons, the young prisoner desperately asks her teammate if they have any real chance of getting out of there alive. The boy tries not to lose hope, but admits the monsters stopped rescuing people and now only bring more hostages to the dark cells. Their sad conversation is interrupted by Neen and Kane walking by, checking the capture lists. The girl watches them, curious about who they could be. Shivering in the corner of the cell, the young adventurer says he has no idea who they are, but can feel an extremely sinister energy coming from the young man. The duo's terror spikes when the heavy iron door squeaks open loudly, revealing the demonic knights suddenly entering the confinement. The brutal guards grab the two by the arms without any gentleness, while the girl struggles, demanding to be released from those heavy chains. Being dragged into the hallway, she asks where they are being taken, receiving only Nin's order telling the guards to go easy on them. The professor commands the escort to stop immediately and asks for the names of the two scared prisoners, who stutter their identities, fearing the worst. Seriously analyzing the duo's faces, the black-haired human bluntly asks if they know any adventurer named Luke. Outraged by his cynicism, Dane yells that the demons themselves kidnapped him along with them. The mentor ignores his tone and simply confirms the valuable information. A look of satisfaction takes over the strategist's face as he puts the pieces together, deducing that this Luke guy was the spy infiltrated in the city of Sodor. Without wasting time on the hostage's suffering, Neen turns his head and asks his butler to quickly provide pen and paper for a quick test. With the sketch ready in hand, the professor shows the drawing to the prisoners on the floor, wanting to know if they recognize the person on the paper. The pink-haired girl's eyes widen in deep shock as she recognizes her friend's face, while her partner questions how the demon knows about him. Ignoring the drama, Neen asks Kane if this man suffered Rin's brainwashing. The butler confirms he was the agent sent to the slaughter. Pleased with the incredible luck, the strategist orders them to bring everyone involved to his office as soon as the triage is done. He knows very well that the human kingdom's powers are dangerous, recalling that rising hostility always brings forth three heroes. The first and most formidable of them is exactly Luke, known by everyone as the powerful hero of the sword. Since the city guard leader would never leave a puppet alive, the professor already suspected the enemy spy's fatal destiny. Soon after, Kane enters the office leading the two young prisoners and announces the order has been carried out. The mentor analyzes the duo with interest, recognizing both of their enormous potential and feeling it would be a waste to sell them off as common slaves. Without stalling, Neen points directly at them and demands they start serving him from now on. The butler panics at the absurd idea, warning that keeping humans in the castle will cause a widespread revolt. Keeping his cool, the Lord says he has his own reasons for this and tells the advisor not to worry. Wrapped in a menacing aura, he pressures the duo, asking if they will accept the offer to stay alive and be treated well. The manipulator makes it clear they can refuse, but warns their fate will be miserable, slavery, or a tragic end. The pink-haired girl's eyes widen in profound shock as she hears the professor dryly state that their friend is gone. Revolted by the coldness, the boy accuses the monsters of being the culprits, but the human shoots back saying the demons didn't deal the final blow. He reveals Luke was finished off by the guildmaster from the city of Sodor itself, leaving it up to them whether to believe the information or not. Seeing the young woman's complete despair, the strategist ends the subject by demanding an immediate decision on the deal. The adventurer hesitates, feeling disgusted about working for monsters, but questions if the Lord will really keep his promise to let them live. Before he can finish, the girl steps forward, overcome with sadness, and accepts the alliance proposal. Dane despairs, calling his friend crazy, indignantly asking how she can blindly trust their enemies. Trembling with rage, she reminds her partner of how they were always despised and humiliated by their own fellow humans just for being broke. In tears, the young woman vents that she refuses to fall or become just another slave, preferring to grab the only chance of survival. She stares at the strategist's menacing figure, guaranteeing she'll do whatever it takes, even if she has to seal a dangerous pact. Unable to find a better way out, the boy grinds his teeth, frustrated with his own helplessness and lack of choices. He lowers his head and caves to the pressure, begging for the deal to be honored before asking what they have to do. Walking toward the two of them, Neen decrees they should just focus on training, since right now they are nothing but dead weight. He imposes a strict 3-year deadline for them to prove their worth, threatening to discard them if they fail this mission. The next day in the castle courtyard, the professor announces the class will be about swordsmanship, getting the little ruler quite hyped. Knowing from his own memories that she has a talent for it, he decides to teach at least the basic fundamentals of weapon handling. For the training to work properly, the guy warns that his student will need to use both hands and temporarily let go of her teddy bear. He knows the demand is tough, since it's the last memento of her late father, but emphasizes it will be for a very short time. Going against the odds, the little girl fully trusts her mentor's words and sets her most precious belonging to rest on a chair. She affectionately pets the plushie and sweetly asks it to wait just a little bit for her return. Assuming his instructor's stance, Neen shows how to hold the weapon's hilt and guides the girl to mimic the initial movement. The little lord lifts her heavy crimson blade with impressive ease, innocently asking if her posture is correct. Amazed by the perfection of her natural pose, he asks if the girl has trained before, but she swears it's her first time. Getting back on track, the professor announces the day's exercise will just be delivering clean swings in the air, the true foundation of swordsmanship. He demonstrates the movement, swinging the sword with so much force and speed that the air pressure kicks up the dirt from the ground with a boom. Xier's eyes sparkle with wonder at the fast strike, and the mentor encourages her to try replicating the movement right after. Focused on the lesson, the girl steps forward firmly and brings down her massive weapon with deadly precision, following the instructions given. The simple swing generates a terrifying magical shockwave, forcing the strategist to cover his face so he wouldn't be blown away. The uncontrolled energy tears up the stone ground and destroys all the training gear that was in the brutal attack's path. The human stands in absolute silence, breaking a cold sweat as he processes the immense destructive potential of such a small child. He notes that the legendary sword's absurd stat multiplier operates in a much more violent way than in the original simulation. Completely oblivious to the chaos she caused, Xier asked sweetly if she did well, receiving an immediate compliment from the shell-shocked professor. Fearing for the castle's structural integrity, he ends the training right there and decrees that from now on, they'll only use wooden swords. While putting away the stuff in the wrecked courtyard, the strategist remembers an important detail and decides to bring up a new topic out of nowhere. Exuding a dark and jealous aura, the little student angrily asks about the human girl she saw walking around the castle. Caught off guard by the sudden possessiveness, the professor hurries to explain that he only captured the intruders so they could study on their own. She pouts and accuses the human of lying, since he's already teaching Citri, but he swears that's just a profitable business deal. With a calmer heart, Xier looks up hopefully and asks if he will always be her exclusive mentor forever and ever. The guy replies gently, calmly confirming that the little lord is and will continue to be his one and only true disciple. The girl blushes with joy, hugging her weapon tightly, completely melting at her favorite professor's comforting promise. Right then, the butler sneaks up and whispers in the strategist's ear, letting him know that the young ruler's birthday is very close. Processing the unexpected news, the mentor sighs heavily, realizing he just got himself a delicate problem to solve. Not knowing what to do, he seeks Citri out for advice, leaving Her Majesty visibly annoyed at being interrupted during her rest. The demon crosses her arms, rolls her eyes, and tells him to spit the problem out already if he wants help, warning she has no patience for beating around the bush. He reveals the issue involves his student, and right away, the woman wonders if they fought, seeing this as the perfect chance to hire him. However, upon finding out the big dilemma is just a kid's birthday present, she loses all her excitement and initial composure. Neen lets out a nervous laugh, seeing the clear frustration on his ally's face, who tells him not to get his hopes up about escaping the floor. Trying to actually help, she suggests easy and predictable options like dolls, pudding, and delicious cakes that the little girl always loves to eat. Noticing the professor's ambition, Citri teases him, finding his desperate urge to give a truly memorable and special gift kind of cute. Focused on the goal, the strategist recalls how fascinated the girl was by a huge shiny crown in the castle's treasure warehouse. Her Majesty solved the problem on the spot, suggesting he simply ask the blacksmiths to adjust the jewel's diameter for the kid. Annoyed by the guy's sarcastic tone, she warns that the piece is already in the little girl's room, but the human ignores her yelling and walks away in a hurry. Later, in the gloomy hallways, the mentor lurks by the walls while confirming if the ruler really went to eat in the kitchen. The fox maid swears loyalty to the secret mission, confidently confirming the head chef is keeping the kid busy with delicious sweets. Trusting the perfect distraction, the intruder silently turns the bedroom doorknob and pushes the heavy door without making the slightest sound. The professor's heart almost stops when he walks into the room and comes face to face with his student standing right in front of him, hugging her teddy tightly. Caught red-handed and sweating cold, he hides his nerves by praising her mana sensor, relieved he didn't ruin the whole surprise. The white-haired girl curiously asks the reason for the unexpected visit, and the liar comes up with an invitation to go for a walk outside on the spot. The duo walks through the illuminated gardens, with the professor trying to act normal while the maid sneaks away to cover their rear. Admiring the stunning night sky, the child points in awe at the massive full moon majestically lighting up the top of the stone walls. Sitting next to her on a bench, he feels relieved and satisfied he nailed the gift idea after noticing her deep passion for shiny things. Adopting a fatherly tone, the guy asks her to always prioritize her own health and not be shy about telling him immediately if things get hard. Bathed in moonlight, she replies tenderly that she loves having him as a mentor, swearing that absolutely nothing feels hard when he's by her side. Excited, the ruler begs for even more intense training, while the human sweetly gives in, reminding her that resting is also crucial. Radiant about the walk, Seer happily agrees while hugging her bear. Watching the scene, the professor mentally hopes the girl never loses this innocence. Right then, a mission completed notification pops up in front of the strategist. Pleased with the result, he calls the little lord to head back inside the castle. Far away on the 70th floor, the professor visits a workshop and greets an old acquaintance named Doomgrim. The blacksmith asks what he owes the honor of the visit. Getting straight to the point, Nin reveals he'd like to commission a special job for the ruler. He asks them to make the exact same design, just in a smaller size. The artisan guarantees he knows the perfect blacksmith for the job and asks for the deadline. The human demands delivery in 1 week and that everything is kept strictly secret. Agreeing to the terms, the old man reports that the general research is also progressing. He says they already have prototypes, but they can't be displayed just yet. Unrush, the mentor tells them to take as much time as they need to create something solid. The artisan promises success in the endeavor, leaving the guy anxious for the result. Walking back up the stairs, the strategist concludes that Seer's real gift is secured. However, his thoughts are cut off by loud crying. Arriving at the hall, he finds the little girl crying desperately. Cecily and Kane are trying to calm the child down, explaining that the professor just stepped out for a moment. Trying to handle the crying fit, the maid suggests they wait by eating some delicious pudding. Completely inconsolable, the little lord rejects the offer, screaming. The human's eyes widen in shock at the scene. Even the servants freeze, unable to believe the ruler turned down her favorite dessert. Noticing the guy's presence in the room, the girl stops crying instantly. With eyes full of tears, she calls out to him with a trembling voice. Overcome with relief, Seer starts crying loudly again and runs desperately toward her mentor, throwing herself into a tight hug against him. Returning the hug affectionately, the man confirms he's there. Worried, he asks the reason for so much despair and sudden crying. The butler explains that the guy's silent departure made the girl believe he had left forever. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Min sighs heavily. Trying to reassure his student, the professor explains he just stepped out for a quick errand. He apologizes for not letting her know and suggests they go inside to talk better. Already on the couch with the child on his lap, he asks if she's feeling calmer. Taking the blame for the slip-up, the guy asks what made her so scared like that. Huddled and sad, the girl confesses she was terrified of being abandoned. Understanding her insecurity, the mentor ensures there's no reason to worry. Touching the little girl's face tenderly, he promises to keep taking care of her. His goal is to guide her until she grows strong and reaches the top of the demonic world. The promise, however, backfires. With teary eyes, the young lord deduces the professor will leave as soon as she achieves that goal. Caught off guard by her sharp logic, the strategist hesitates. He knows he plans to go back home when the game ends, but he can't reveal that cruel truth. Hiding his hesitation, the mentor lies, saying he will never leave her and will always be by her side. Still apprehensive, the child asks if that's really true. To change the subject and celebrate their deal, he offers the pudding she had refused earlier. Excited, Seer accepts, even feeling deep down that the promise was fake. While being carried down the halls, the ruler reflects on her ally's hidden intentions. Overcome by a dark feeling, she decides not to let him leave. A chaotic red energy begins to pulse intensely. The little girl decrees in her mind that the mentor belongs to her and will have to stay by her side forever. With a bright, obsessive look, the little lord swears she will try her hardest to trap him. She convinces herself that this way he will never abandon her. Time passes and 1 week goes by, marking Seer's awaited birthday. At the gates of the castle's great hall, the ruler's entrance is announced. Holding hands with the professor, the birthday girl walks down the stairs majestically. The guests applaud the scene, wishing the young floor leader happiness. Oozing cuteness, she waves to the crowd, thanking everyone for the love. In the corner, the army commander is melting with adoration, getting scolded by the vice. Trying to keep her composure, Rin and Varuna approach the staircase. Excited, the warrior hands over a decorated box, announcing it as a gift from the troops. Amazed by the box's contents, Seer excitedly thanks them for the beautiful item. The vice commander bows, stating it's an honor to serve her. Teasing the generals, the professor comments that the gift was a bit too modest. Right then, he notices Citri approaching and asks if her souvenir will be any better. Confident and oozing elegance, the ruler of the neighboring floor claps her hands dryly. She confirms the guy's expectation and orders her servants to bring the surprise. The demons get confused watching a massive golden statue being pushed into the hall. The birthday girl is left speechless as she recognizes her own face in the sculpture. Proud of the extravagant artwork, Citri explains that a leader needs to show off her grandeur. She swears she prepped everything with the intent of highlighting her ally's cuteness. The strategist begrudgingly agrees, surprised by the woman's thoughtful side. Annoyed by his lack of enthusiasm, Her Majesty questions if that was supposed to be a compliment. Ignoring the jab, Seer holds the golden miniature teddy bear and thanks her for the present. Pleased with the reaction, the ally claims the effort was totally worth it. Taking advantage of the festive vibe, the human oozes confidence and announces it's his turn to give his gift. Without wasting time, he calls the blacksmith to bring the item. The old goblin places a luxurious box in the strategist's hands, who praises the good work. The guy asks the butler to hold the teddy bear so he can hand over the present. The advisor stutters in shock upon taking the object, unable to believe the girl let go of her most precious possession in public. The guests are left stunned by the scene. Entirely focused on the mysterious little box, the little girl asks for permission to open it. The professor readily agrees, encouraging her to uncover the surprise. As soon as the lid is lifted, the young lord's eyes shine intensely, reflecting the contents. She lets out a gasp of pure enchantment at what the human prepared. Inside the velvet case rests a beautiful custom-forged crown. The golden item features delicate details and encrusted red jewels, perfect for her. With great care, Neen places the new crown on the child's head, wishing her a happy birthday. Bathed in the hall's light, she thanks her dear mentor. She's so excited that she jumps into the strategist's arms, cheering out loud. Catching her energy, he asks if she really liked the gift that much. Petting his student's hair, the professor notices white strands taking over the red. He figures her external mana storage has finally stabilized. During the pet, the human feels a weird texture on top of the child's head. Confused, he asks the little girl to stay still while she asks what's wrong. Carefully parting the white locks near the crown, the mentor examines the spot. His eyes widen in shock as he spots a small horn growing there. Freaking out over the mutation, Neen yells for the butler to report the problem. Kane sighs tiredly and explains that horns are a totally normal trait for demons. Realizing that was just another hidden detail of her race, the guy hugs the lord in relief. He confesses he was scared the girl was in some kind of pain. The young lord reassures her mentor with joy, guaranteeing she doesn't feel any discomfort. With a calmer heart, he says he's happy to hear that. Even with the situation resolved, the advisor strictly warns that the horns are a sensitive area. Realizing the gravity of the warning, the human promises to be careful. Sometime later, the strategist meets with his advisor in the courtyard to check the preparations. After confirming the setup, he asks about the prototypes. The old blacksmith cautiously approaches and hands one of the crafted weapons to the lord. He hesitates to test the raw equipment, but the young man reassures him, stating that flaws are normal. Turning his attention back to his student, Neen teaches a valuable lesson about resilience. He explains that today's mistakes serve as fuel for future success. Giving the team a vote of confidence, the mentor adopts an encouraging tone, asking them not to be nervous. Encouraged by his words, the goblin artisan agrees. With the fluid motion, the handler pulls the newly forged sword from its sheath to inspect the blade. He praises the exterior finish, admitting it looks flawless. Preparing for the weapon's stress test, the teacher warns the little ruler about the imminent risks. He gently orders her to step back a few paces. As soon as the area is clear, the young man takes a firm combat stance in the center of the courtyard. Slowly, he channels his dense, dark magic into the steel of the sword. The chaotic energy envelops the entire structure of the weapon in the blink of an eye. The absurd pressure of the ancient power makes the air vibrate violently while the blade withstands the load. Observing the insane amount of magic in the weapon, the blacksmith gulps, fearing an explosion. In the middle of the test, the human calls the artisan's name with a serious tone. To everyone's shock and relief, the blade shines brightly without showing any cracks. The strategist lowers the intact weapon and congratulates the team on their excellent work. The artisans celebrate the engineering success, crying tears of joy. Analyzing the weight of the sword, Neen suggests just one adjustment to the blade's edge to finalize the project. Satisfied with the promising result, the lord places his trust in the blacksmiths for the general production. Determined, the old goblin promises to do his best at the forge. Following the success of the test, Seer approaches, curious about the continuation of the plan. The human confirms her suspicions, announcing that the game is about to truly begin. Meanwhile, rumors start circulating strongly in distant cities. Merchants gossip about the sudden emergence of extremely high-quality human weapons. On the 69th floor, a noble analyzes the commercial reports, intrigued. His servant tries to calm him down, arguing that unproven rumors are just gossip. The Duke contradicts the servant, stating that the data indicates something bigger than a simple loot grab. The assistant insists that demonic production has always been ineffective. Going against his own disbelief, the floorlord gets up from the table, determined to investigate personally. He argues that ignoring a commercial threat would be unforgivable. The servant gives up trying to contradict his master and decides to accompany him on the little inspection tour. Curious about the destination of the trip, he asks if the Duke knows where to go. The journey leads the duo to an imposing commercial building that draws attention with its infrastructure. The servant murmurs in surprise at the luxury of the chosen business location. As they cross the doors, they find Kane organizing the hall and recognize the castle. The advisor confirms that selling weapons is an official enterprise of the Lord. In the center of the luxurious environment, Neen welcomes them with an impeccable and inviting posture. Sitting next to the lords, he thanks the intrigued buyers for their presence. The presence of Citri and Seer together leaves the visitors intimidated. The merchants whisper nervously as they notice that the military alliance has also become an economic powerhouse. Observing the genuine fear stamped on the customers' faces, the human stands up satisfied. He knows that dominating the arms market is the first step to conquering the tower. Taking the lead in the negotiation, Citri guarantees that the weapons forged by them are of equal quality to human ones. The floor lord widens his eyes, impressed, realizing the extreme confidence of Her Majesty in putting her own title on the line. Maintaining her imposing posture, the ruler warns that she will only do business with those who have real intentions, allowing the disinterested ones to walk out the door. However, she releases a threatening aura and decrees that if anyone hears the secrets and then refuses the deal, they won't be walking out of there in one piece. Bennett gulps, asking if that's a threat, but the woman calmly replies that it's just a friendly heads up. Even considering the heavy demand, the Duke decides to stay and hear the proposal. The other merchants leave wishing them luck, while the noble sees a golden opportunity to ally himself with such a powerful figure. With the stampede, Nin sighs, noting that only 20 buyers remained, exactly as Her Majesty had predicted. The strategist then steps forward and formally introduces himself, revealing that he is the true mastermind behind the entire business plan. Shocked by the revelation, the visitor immediately deduces that the human is using the ruler merely as a front for his plans. Ignoring the customer's surprise, the mentor moves forward and presents the first proposal, focused on the exclusive trade of weapons for a period of 3 years. The Duke agrees with the fair duration of the contract, but questions how the profits will be divided in this partnership between the floors. The young man explains the technical percentage, claiming to keep the smaller share, making Citri mutter under her breath about his sheer audacity. The noble quickly understands the conditions and concludes that receiving that slice of human-level armaments will yield an absurd profit. To prove he isn't bluffing, the teacher displays 2 nearly identical swords and invites the merchants to compare the quality of the blades. The merchants inspect the equipment in fascination, confirming that the manufacturing level is truly top tier. Holding the firm steel, Bennett realizes the inestimable value of monopolizing those items, noticing that the previous gossip was totally wrong. Thinking about business, the Lord asks about the monthly supply capacity, but finds the amount offered by the human too low to stock the stores. With a confident smile, the strategist praises the customer's perception and clarifies that the production involves much more than just swords. The young man snaps his fingers to get their attention and suggests that the catalog will also include full armor sets and sturdy helmets. The revelation leaves the group completely speechless as they understand the scale and variety of the arsenal that will be commercialized. Listing the vast available military equipment, the mentor guarantees they will send new types of armaments as the development progresses. Observing the success of the negotiation, Citri internally ponders if she shouldn't have demanded a larger slice of the profits before sealing the deal. Satisfied with the conditions presented so far, the Duke excitedly asks what the second proposal promised by the teacher would be. Noticing the merchant's genuine interest, the strategist comments that he had been eyeing this possibility from the very beginning. Nin remembers that in the original game, that Lord was the leader of a huge merchant guild, making him the perfect piece to bring to his side. Analyzing the options, the noble understands that the limited supply makes the products even more valuable and coveted in the market. The human agrees with the commercial logic, predicting that some clients will back down while others will fight tooth and nail for exclusivity. Determined to prove his point visually, the mentor warns that just explaining isn't enough and excuses himself to fetch the practical demonstration. The group watches in confusion as a young man walks towards the building's dungeons, from where he soon announces the arrival of his second major merchandise. The heavy iron doors open, revealing several human captives being aggressively dragged by the local guards. Faced with the despair and cries of the captives, the Duke widens his eyes, deducing that the new offer is about the indentured servant trade. Nine confirms the suspicion, explaining that they have already separated the most useful individuals, making it clear that no one is forced to participate in this business. The merchants whisper apprehensively about the unusual proposal, aware that this kind of activity brings many risks to the region. Evaluating the situation, Bennett ponders that demons hate the human race and that controlling these people as servants has always been a very difficult task. Despite the difficulties, the noble concludes that high society clients would pay fortunes for this, deciding to accept while others refuse. Seeing that only 5 interested buyers remained, the professor takes the floor again to continue detailing the available options. Walking through the damp cells, he points to the first group of captives, highlighting that they are perfect for heavy manual labor. Right after, the young man presents a second cell with better-looking people, destined exclusively for the entertainment market. Finally, he shows a third, more intimidating group, focused on private security, guaranteeing they possess the same strength as common knights. Impressed with the caliber of the combat merchandise, the Lord praises the selection, but is interrupted by the furious shouts of one of the prisoners. Overflowing with anger, the human stuck behind bars curses the demons and demands that they just finish him off instead of turning him into a pet. The merchant observes the man's rebellion and comments that this lack of control will bring big future problems, but the strategist calmly disagrees. Without losing his calm posture in the face of the knight's outburst, the teacher simply raises his hand and snaps his fingers dryly. Immediately, a magic seal glows on the neck of the rebellious human, who writhes, screaming in pure agony and despair. Consumed by the punitive magic, the prisoner continues cursing the demons with all his might while in deep distress. The chaotic purple energy completely envelops the knight's body, brutally forcing him against the cold dungeon floor. Totally subdued by the pain, the man collapses to his knees while Nin explains he engraved a trigger curse on each captive's neck. With a dark and intimidating look, the mentor guarantees that even brainwashing is included in the package, asking the buyers for their final decision. Amazed by the absolute control, one of the assistants questions the origin of such great products, and the Duke replies that they struck a direct deal with the neighboring floor. Already back on his own floor inside his enormous department store, Bennett confesses he never imagined the weapon quality would be so absurdly good. Desperate for the new items, another merchant begs for a supply, offering to pay double the price, but the Duke refuses, claiming to have total exclusivity. The man swallows his frustration, realizing that the monopoly on those luxury items will cause an unprecedented seismic shift throughout the tower's market. Focused on expansion, the noble turns to his subordinate, asking about the final preparations, and receives confirmation that everything is running perfectly. The assistant excitedly comments that the demonic elite is hungry for new diversions, guaranteeing the imminent success of the next big auction. Far away, the leader Dantalion calmly reads the letter sent by the great merchant, praising that subject's commercial intelligence. The suited man analyzes the VIP invitation to watch the new servant auction, finding the idea of attending merely as a spectator quite boring. With a dangerous and calculating expression on his face, the Lord plans to bring some special company to shake things up during the exclusive event. A few days later, the little Lord and her mentor arrive at the Duke's luxurious department store, leaving the little girl amazed by the impressive size of the place. Walking through the shiny corridors, two human captives accompany the duo and whisper in confusion about why the young man brought them along on that trip. The store owner welcomes the ruler and the strategist with great excitement, and the young man mentions they came to take a look and search for magical tools. As the Duke guides the small group up the luxurious staircases, the platinum-haired captive calls out to the professor in a very hesitant and nervous manner. The captive points to the other imprisoned people and asks if they are human servants, getting a dry cutoff from the mentor advising him that this is none of his business. The tense silence is broken by the sound of the heavy door opening, revealing a dark room illuminated only by dozens of valuable items. The two prisoners stare at the objects displayed on the shelves, completely amazed as they realize all those pieces are of the highest quality. Breaking the ice, Nin surprises the captives by offering them to pick any artifact in there that might help them with their advanced studies. Still in disbelief at the boss's sudden generosity, the girl timidly points to a small, shiny ring on the counter, asking if she can keep it. Analyzing the request, the human understands her smart choice, since the item serves to artificially store mana for races without a natural core. Observing her beloved teacher's unusual interaction, Seer narrows her eyes, totally suspicious of his true intentions with those two. Noticing the little girl's jealousy, the young man affectionately pets her head and asks if she'd also like to choose a special gift to take home. Completely melted by the affection, the young lord picks up an extremely flashy necklace, guaranteeing she loved the piece because it was the shiniest one in the whole place. The strategist examines the blue pendant and immediately approves of his student's choice upon noticing that the jewelry has a very strong protection spell built in. Deciding to take it all, he instructs the store owner to send the bill straight to the castle's finances, confirming he will also pay for the captive's items. Checking the schedule, the mentor asks how much time is left until the big event, and the merchant warns they need to leave right that second so they aren't late. As the group walks towards the auction, the two humans whisper in awe behind their boss's back, realizing he truly intends to take care of them from then on. The auctioneer grabs everyone's attention to present the perfect item for the summer season. Excited, the host announces the batch of human captives with a starting bid of 5 gold coins. Observing the scene, the strategist thanks Kane for the guarantee of obedience. From the VIP box, the two young captives understand that the boss's previous warning was actually a direct heads-up for them. Impressed by the move, Bennett concludes that the professor used the auction to solve supply issues and increase profits all at once. Curious about the situation, the pink-haired girl asks the mentor why they aren't being sold as well, since they would fetch a great price. Nin calmly explains that he also needs trustworthy subordinates, comparing his need with the maids who accompany the lord. The young ruler questions if they have to be human, but the young man assures her that certain tasks require it. Satisfied, she states that she trusts him completely. Shifting the focus to the duo, the mentor calls Dane and Eerie by name and asks directly if they regret the choice they made. The two youngsters stay silent for a moment, processing the weight of the question and the harsh reality around them. The gavel strikes, selling the prisoner in the cage, making the platinum-haired boy reflect that this could easily have been their fate. Relieved, Dane concludes that holding the human's hand was the best decision of his life, and Eerie agrees. Satisfied, the professor lets them know he'll be counting on them from now on. 5 years pass, and a bright magical energy envelops the area during an intense training session. During practice in the castle courtyard, the Lord shows great progress, receiving praise from the young man for having improved a lot in her mana storage. Now older and more confident, Sarah calmly turns around upon noticing the arrival of her dear teacher. Seeing the student's effort, Neen suggests changing the location of today's lesson, and the girl excitedly asks if they're going somewhere fun. The human confesses he doesn't know if it'll be fun, but guarantees it's an essential lesson. Pouting, the student argues he should handle official business on his own. Without giving in to her whining, the strategist reminds her that she can't run away from her responsibilities just out of laziness. Defeated, the young lord agrees to tag along. Walking through the castle gardens, the mentor tests the girl's knowledge by asking if she knows what day today is, but she says no. He reveals that it's the end of the 2-year exclusivity contract on the weapons. Accompanying the group, Citri questions the reason for not renegotiating the noble's offer. Oozing confidence, Seer explains that they've already secured enough distribution channels and no longer need to depend on just one partner in the market. The Lord adds that many merchants are dissatisfied with the monopoly, and giving hope to other guilds will secure much better terms. The professor praises the student's excellent judgment, confirming that keeping the monopoly now would be a strategic mistake and that the timing is perfect for a change. Showing she's paying attention to outside rumors, the girl comments she heard that the human kingdom is also facing a huge military uproar. Historically, the Northern War triggered by the Alliance and the Bismarck Empire was a crucial event to focus on strengthening their own factions in the Tower. During this period of intense chaos, the demonic territories gained a golden chance to expand their military power while their enemies took themselves down. Despite this, Nee reveals that this isn't the main reason for the move and asks if the student remembers the original goal set in the past. The young lord promptly recalls that his intention from the start was to completely ruin Dantalion's credit in the black market. With a calculating smile on his face, the mentor decrees that the time has finally come to take real action against their upper-floor rival. Already in the meeting room with the merchants, the strategist states bluntly that they will not renew the exclusivity, as 5 years of shared profits were enough. However, he raises his finger imposingly and offers a new proposal in exchange for ending the old agreement, capturing the undivided attention of the present nobles. To kick off the new phase of the plan, the professor presents a classified and detailed document to the building's business partners. The goblin merchant reads the paper in shock while the strategist explains that they just need to spread that rumor in exchange for more captive workers. One of the nobles questions the veracity of the information. Adopting a dark posture, Neen asks if they dare doubt his word after so much time of mutual trust. Weighing the massive risks, another merchant ponders that spreading the rumor will make Dantalion a mortal enemy, but cutting ties with the castle would be even more disastrous. Attentive to the pressure, Citri questions the reason for pushing so hard. The young man replies that the time has come for the partners to take risks, or he'll look for braver allies. Left with no choice, the goblin affirms that business with the human has already become vital for the stores, guaranteeing that the group will accept the dangerous smear campaign. Satisfied with the total submission of the merchants, the mentor turns his back and leaves the hall, letting them know he'll be counting on their relentless dedication to the task. Back in their quarters, Citri insists on knowing if the intelligence is real, arguing that the rival lord was never careless and that they should have been warned beforehand. Annoyed by the arrogant intrusion, Seer claps back at Her Majesty, stating she is independent now, and throws in her face the real reason she hasn't visited the 72nd floor lately. Faced with the student's intense, glowing blue eyes, the woman gulps, intimidated by the girl, and agrees to be more present, asking what the next step is. Maintaining his usual calm, the professor instructs the ruler to simply act normally in business, as the rest of the complex plan will unfold on its own. Far from there, the situation starts to heat up on the 69th floor. directly in the luxurious castle of the lord responsible for the weapons. A leaked document detailing suspicions of forged sales in Dantalion's businesses reaches the hands of the local leadership, causing total outrage and confusion. Completely furious about the leaked accounts, the Lord tears up the papers shouting, demanding to know who the scoundrel was that dug up that trade secret. His advisor tries to explain that the wholesale weapons business was their financial pillar, but took a direct hit due to the high quality of Neen's human pieces. With warehouses full of unsold products, Dantalion had cooked the books to simulate fake sales and hide the gigantic hole from the losses. He believed that keeping the valuable connections made up for the losses, but now he panics, realizing the rumor makes him look like a scammer who stole his own money. The Lord desperately tries to understand how the leak happened without inside help, but the crisis is worsened by the arrival of a servant rushing in. Bringing even worse news, the assistant warns that the allied forges are surrounding the castle and aggressively collecting their accumulated debts. Pressured by the total collapse, Dantalion grips his own horns in frustration, completely backed into a corner and not knowing where to get the money to pay off all the creditors. The servant suggests burning the entire stock at cost price to calm the merchants and pay the blacksmiths, warning they have no other financial alternative. He firmly argues that taking a colossal loss is better than facing their downfall, recalling what happened to Andromalius when Citri decided to bare her fangs. Breaking into a cold sweat over the fatal threat, the Lord orders them to contact Decaribia to beg for a loan, preferring to humiliate himself to a superior than be swallowed whole. From afar at his desk, the strategist smiles sadistically as he predicts all of his rivals' moves, considering the enemy's beautiful despair a true work of art. The tense atmosphere gives way to a calm afternoon in the professor's new office, where he reviews and goes over the final details of the operation with his attentive student. Mean methodically explains that Decaribia's nature will make him wring out every last coin from Dantalion, who will make any abusive sacrifice just to stay afloat. The young lord asks curiously how he knew about the fake stored inventory. The young man credits the espionage to Dane, omitting that he used his past knowledge of the game. Surprised by the revelation, Seer admits that the two humans proved to be quite useful. Provocative, the mentor asks if she doubts his vision, or is she simply feeling jealous. Blushing and waving her arms, the girl quickly denies the accusations, angrily confessing that she just hates the fact that he gives so much exclusive attention to the servants. Finding her explosive reaction very amusing, the human pets her head, noting that her cute side remains intact, guaranteeing he's her eternal teacher above all else. Enjoying the affectionate head rub, the girl confirms the mentor's words with a focused look and asks if it's true, being reassured by him right after. With her eyes on the tactical report, the ruler seriously deduces that the enemy alliance would crumble naturally, but suggests it would be much better to accelerate their disaster. The professor instantly approves of his student's sharp vision and kindly asks her to summon Commander Ren to permanently take care of this dirty little obstacle. A short time later, in the audience chamber of the 72nd floor, the Fox Warrior crosses the gates and kneels respectfully before the royal summons. The strategist explains that the 68th floor will send a strong delegation to help Dantalion on the 69th floor, and that this meeting must be prevented at all costs. Roughly sliding a heavy sword across the marble floor, Neen tasks the experienced military commander with intercepting and wiping out the delegation on their way. Ren holds the strange weapon firmly and analyzes the blade's gleam, noticing by the engraving pattern that the equipment was forged on the 69th floor itself. The warrior immediately grasps the dark genius of the plan, understanding the silent order to frame Dantalion using his own counterfeit weapons. With a sharp smile on her face, the woman sheathes the blade and accepts the mission with pride, honored to get her hands dirty for the ruler who is now a feared queen. As soon as the commander leaves for the hunt, Seer flashes a radiant smile, demanding to know if she did a good job, eagerly asking for her well-deserved reward for the hard work. Thoughtful about the unexpected request, the young man puts a hand to his chin and tries to playfully guess what kind of cute stuffed animal doll the girl would like to get as a gift. The extremely childish suggestion bruises the student's ego, who makes a cold expression of disappointment and mutters with red cheeks that she definitely doesn't want a toy. Without giving time for corrections, she turns her back annoyed and marches off heavily, leaving the professor sweating in confusion about the start of her dreaded rebellious phase. Already in the unstable portal zone connecting the enemy borders, Rin gathers her tactical squad and demands total restriction of magical powers to shield their identities. Vice Commander Varuna inquires about the presence of the lethal Knights of the Pentagram in the 15-man escort, but the fox already divides the targets, ready for the takedown. Hidden among the foliage, Rin draws the counterfeit blade, warning that the elimination mission will be a bit tricky to execute. Confident, the commander decides to handle the main target alone, ensuring the blame won't fall on them while ordering the squad into position. Wasting no time with further explanations, the allied group quickly moves out to the ambush point. A short time later, the large magical portal in the border region begins to vibrate, emitting a strong purple glow. The enemy entourage crosses the border walking calmly, and the warrior watches with relief the absence of elite knights before taking action. In the blink of an eye, she advances relentlessly, delivering a devastating, fatal strike against the front lines of the guards. Taking advantage of the huge opening created by the first takedown, the military leader loudly orders her men to eliminate all targets at once. Surrounded on all sides, the delegation's security detail goes into total panic as they are caught by surprise by the extermination squad. With the clash concluded in a matter of minutes, Rin declares the job done and announces that the troops can now head back home. Far away, Dantalion goes into complete shock upon receiving the news that the delegation from the 68th floor was entirely wiped out. His personal assistant sorrowfully confirms the terrible tragedy, warning that they need to notify the neighboring lord about what happened immediately. The lord reacts with outrage, claiming innocence, but freezes in terror when the subordinate reveals that the weapon found at the scene was one of their products. Desperate over the trap, the suited man deduces that Decarabia will use this to extort them and decides that the only way out is to offer compensation first. Infuriated, Dantalion slams his fist on the table, deducing that Citri set the whole thing up, and orders his troops to prepare for war while alerting his allies. At that moment, his blind fury is suddenly interrupted by a servant throwing the room's door wide open in a state of total panic. The ruler questions the sudden commotion and collapses upon discovering that Decarabia's army has already invaded his territory through the borders. The advisor notes that the attack was far too fast, making the lord realize in shock that his own neighbor might have forged the massacre to dominate him. Certain he was betrayed by his own business partner, the suited man grinds his teeth in hatred and orders all his forces to block the invasion. Back on the 72nd floor, Neenan informs his student that the war between the two upper neighbors has finally broken out according to plan. The young ruler cheers at the victorious news, celebrating the perfect opportunity to profit while their rivals take each other out. Not understanding a term he used earlier, she asks for the meaning and hears from her mentor that they'll make bank without having to lift a finger. Kicking off the tactical maneuvers, the young man orders Emsion to prep the troops to join the fray as soon as the two armies clash head-on. The professor explains that the focus will just be to hinder the stronger army, a sneaky plan that immensely pleases the reptilian commander. Supporting the sabotage strategy, Seer places her trust in the soldier, who bows respectfully, accepting the important mission. Turning to Rin, the human orders the merchants from the 69th floor to be evacuated to the 70th floor, but the fox fears the nobles might refuse. Calmly, the strategist explains that the sellers only stayed there for security, something that no longer exists after Dantalion's invasion, and lies. With a calculating look, Neen asserts that offering advantageous policies in the new territory will forever destroy whatever trust the former lord possessed. The student questions if the ruler of the 71st floor would approve of this move, and the professor guarantees she won't turn down easy money. Grasping the genius of the economic play, Seer concludes that the rival lord will crumble on his own, while the fox confirms her evacuation orders. With the tactical meeting wrapped up, the human notices his student sitting quietly on the throne, kindly asking if she has any lingering doubts about the complex operation. Denying any confusion with the plan, the girl excitedly reveals she just had an amazing idea to help with the war, and the mentor tells her to spill it. She suggests using the 5th Legion as a distraction to bring down the 69th floor once and for all, but the human rejects it, considering the risk way too high. Determined to prove her worth, the little lord thumps her chest, guaranteeing she can handle the job thanks to all her hard training and the magic she's learned. Giving no room for arguments, Neen shuts down her enthusiasm, stating that it's not time for her to step onto the battlefield yet, asking her to grow up a bit more. Frustrated by the constant rejection, Seer throws a loud tantrum, demanding to know how much longer she'll have to wait, swearing she's already ready. Analyzing the situation in silence, the professor internally admits that her current power would already be enough to crush the region's enemies. Despite knowing his student's absurd strength, his protective instinct speaks louder, fearing that a child like her could end up seriously hurt or worse. Neen swallows hard, imagining the worst-case scenario in the trenches, aware that any tragedy involving the Lord would completely destroy their future. With a soft sigh, the strategist pats the girl's head, asking for patience, and apologizes for being selfish in wanting to keep her safe in the backlines. To make up for the letdown of the veto, the young man proposes a deal and promises to grant the student any wish as soon as the war safely ends. Instantly hyped up by the promise, Seer blushes with joy and sweetly asks for them to go on a trip together anywhere fun. Surprised they had never gone out just for a stroll, the human accepts the request right away, feeling the weight of having neglected the girl's childhood. Later in her room, the ruler rolls around in bed, surrounded by plushies, totally unable to sleep due to her extreme excitement about the guaranteed trip. Hugging her teddy bear to her chest, the young lord sighs affectionately as she realizes the professor has become the most precious person in her life. Driven by this enormous attachment, Seer's eyes gleam intensely as she comes to the dangerous conclusion that she needs to end the war quickly. Totally focused on her personal goal of going on a trip, Seer decides she doesn't care about breaking the rules and acting like a disobedient child. The next day, the little ruler intercepts Rin before the military departure and directly demands to be taken to the combat zone with them. Exuding pure royal authority, the student uses her rank as unquestionable justification, making the commander acknowledge the girl's absurd magical talent. Despite knowing the Lord's power would guarantee an easy win, the warrior shakes her head in denial, arguing that this mission belongs to the army. Not taking no for an answer, Seer crosses her arms intimidatingly and tests her subordinate's loyalty, asking who she truly serves. Pushed against the wall, the fox stutters, swearing absolute loyalty to her natural lord, falling into the trap that royal orders overrule the strategists. Defeated by the flawless logic, the warrior sighs, giving in to the pressure, and the ruler celebrates her victory, confirming her presence in the dangerous invasion. Worried about the worst imaginable consequences, the soldier begs the young girl not to take too many risks in the battles, getting a cheerful guarantee in return. Noticing the lack of seriousness in her tone, Rin insists on the safety promise, getting an impatient pout from Seer, who tells her subordinate to chill out. Turning toward the horizon with a confident look, the girl sends a mental message to her dear mentor, asking him to just wait for her victory. Far from the castle, the war reaches its violent peak at the border fortifications, with commanders screaming desperately to keep the defenses up. Answering the general's frantic shouts, a relentless rain of arrows plummets from the walls, straight into the invading enemy troops. The heavy steel projectiles hit their mark with maximum precision, piercing the armor of the soldiers who fall in agony in the middle of no man's land. However, Decarabia's forces don't back down an inch and activate their fearsome siege artifacts, which begin to pulse with a dense purple arcane energy. A hoarse voice orders the maximum discharge of the machines, releasing immense pillars of devastating energy that tear through the battlefield toward the high walls. The massive impact hits the defenses, causing colossal explosions, swallowing the desperate archers in a lethal flash of pure magical destruction. The rubble starts to fall. And upon seeing that huge amount of rocks falling, the soldiers become desperate. At that moment, one of them is completely crushed by one of these rocks, leaving his partner in despair. On the uneven ground, the infantry raises their heavy shields to block the rain of enemy projectiles, frustrated at being totally pinned down. Realizing the ranks will be wiped out if they stay in the same position, one warrior steps forward, cutting through the attacks, and orders an immediate retreat for everyone. That warrior was a knight in shining golden armor. Another barrage of attacks comes his way, and he uses his sword to defend himself from these attacks. Relentless after clearing the entire area with extreme ease, the imposing figure demands in a deep tone that the invasion soldiers abandon their fear and march. Carrying his heavy, stained blade on his broad shoulder, Balthazar formally introduces himself to the army as the first star of the formidable pentagram. On the other side of the trench, the defense troops panic upon seeing the living legend of war, catching furious slaps from their frustrated commander. Dissatisfied with the cowardice of others, a new spell emerges from the shadows, cursing the defenders themselves as useless worms who fight only for simple coins. Relying on no one from the troop, the newcomer channels his mana, evoking a complex and radiant green magic circle in the air while whispering chants. In just a few seconds, infernal flames are conjured with extreme violence, creating an emerald storm that sweeps through the main passages. Surprised by the newly cast spell, the armored giant notices the new threat on the battlefield. The green flames engulf the area as a soldier screams in despair, warning about the attack against Lord Balthazar. The horned mage praises His Majesty's impressive power, but soon orders the soldiers to prep for the next volley. Taking advantage of the gap left by the leader's supposed demise, the invading troops charge forward with everything they have to try and easily take the fortress. An officer with glasses is confident of victory, believing that without the pentagram knight, the fight has finally been balanced in their favor. With a large golden blade dropping from the sky amidst the smoke, Decarabia's false sense of advantage disappears instantly. However, the weapon scores a direct hit on one of the defending warriors, who spits blood as he is brutally pierced and thrown against the ruined ground. The soldier's body falls lifelessly, while Balthazar yanks his heavy sword from the dirt, ready to wipe out the rest. Intact, through the dust and rubble, the armored giant emerges totally unscathed from the emerald magic attack. Balthazar mocks the weakness of the spell he endured, claiming he only felt a slight heat warming the metal of his breastplate. Firmly, he grips the handle of his weapon, calling Lord Antalion's forces completely pathetic. The warriors scoff at that supposed defense alliance, questioning if they really thought they could take on Decarabia's army. Totally annoyed by the insult, the allied mage yells that the knight only survived the direct impact thanks to his armor's resistance. Unfazed by the tantrum, Balthazar defends the gift received from His Majesty, telling the mage to blame his own weakness in the attack. Determined to end that dragged-out combat, the Golden Warrior states he has seen enough and preps his final move. In a lethal and devastating motion, Balthazar strikes the ground with all his might, causing an explosion of energy in the fortress ruins. He closely watches the massive damage he just created, looking to confirm if he crushed his main targets once and for all. Seeing that someone dodged the fulminating attack, the giant laments, but is soon amazed to see a very familiar figure emerging from the dust. The little ruler of the 72nd floor reveals herself with a sharp smile, excitedly confirming her dark identity. Behind her, the horned mage gulps at her sudden arrival, reflecting that the girl would never enter the war without demanding payment. Ignoring the advisor's doubts, Seer confirms the enemy's elite title, who questions why a lord would be in those trenches. She answers directly that he is getting in the way of her goals there, provoking the fury of the warrior who belittles her for just being a kid. Seeking a perfect opportunity to please his master, Balthazar charges forward thirsty for battle, swearing to take the 72nd floor right then and there. Showing no fear at the charge, the young lord channels a dense wave of mana that makes the air around her weigh down brutally. With a simple and powerful vocal command, the professor's student initiates her annihilation spell, aiming directly at the warrior. A colossal and bizarre skull of burning flames appears, engulfing Balthazar in an uncontrollable inferno of pure destructive heat. Shocked by the overwhelming level of the attack, he realizes in terror that the girl cast the magic without even using a prep chant. The fire is so extreme that the sacred metal begins to melt rapidly, revealing a magical potency far superior to Dantalion's. In a desperate effort, the giant swings his weapon, cutting through the wall of fire, warning that brute force wouldn't be enough to finish him. However, the lethal determination in Seer's eyes makes it clear that the flames were just a small warning of what she still kept secret. The feared pentagram warrior collapses to his knees, smoking, while the young lord sighs bored and disappointed with the outcome. Completely dumbfounded, the allied mage, named Crowley, breaks into a cold sweat for not even having been able to see the magical movement of the takedown. Right after, Commander Rin comes running furiously and scolds the ruler for having advanced alone into the extreme danger zone. The fox warrior cuts her lecture short, startled to notice the giant enemy fallen and burned on the ground behind the girl. The allied soldiers laugh, celebrating the little lord's display of strength, until they get a silencing scolding from the annoyed commander. Pressured by the politics of war, Rint warns that hurting Balthazar will guarantee a direct conflict against the upper floor, something the girl ignores. Raising her sword indifferently toward the enemy troops, Seer coldly suggests they just silence all the eyewitnesses. The commander evaluates the dark suggestion, remembering that the rest of Decarabia's elite cavalry has probably already detected that mana explosion. Flashing a crafty smile just like Nin's, the Lord proposes pinning the blame for the clash on the neighbor they supposedly came to help. Hidden among the debris, Crowley feels a freezing chill run down his spine as he witnesses the cruelty hidden in the white-haired girl. Ignoring the stunned looks of the local guard, Seer continues detailing the elimination plan, followed by a good extortion against the political partner. Rin praises her student's malice, who crosses her arms proudly, claiming to faithfully follow the professor's teachings on threats and control. To wrap up the strategic discussion, the ruler turns to the fox and sweetly demands the complete annihilation of the present invading troops. Obeying immediately, Varuna and Rin prep their weapons, commanding the tactical squad to wipe the enemies off the map without mercy. Sweating nervously as the clash unfolds, the mage fakes gratitude for the military rescue, already planning to pay up as quickly as possible to send them away. While the allies attack without hesitation, Seer concentrates a dense and oppressive mana, creating an immense black circle shaped like an eye. The mysterious dark spell tears through the air silently and detonates directly on the allied castle's central defenses, catching everyone off guard. With a brutal rumble, the fortified towers crack and sink from the force of the impact, making the soldiers scream in terror about an earthquake. In total despair, at the intentional friendly fire, Crowley yells, begging to understand why their savior was blowing up their own structures. The girl coldly denies the accusations, telling the man to remember that everyone would already be gone and forgotten if it wasn't for her violent magic. Refusing the girl's cynicism, the mage concludes that territorial domination was the real plan all along and threatens to undo the dark spell. But his defensive barrier fails in an instant, and he dizzily realizes that the strategist's student possesses an advanced nullification skill. With a dominant look, the ruler suggests the advisor either get buried along with the tower or swear total submission to her so he won't sink. Surrounded by dust and the incalculable weight of Seer's power, Crowley grasps the fatal abyss that separates the forces of the lower and upper floors. Feeling Rin's blade lightly touch his back, the mage notes he'll end up sprawled on the ground, just like Lord Balthazar if he decides to play stubborn. Totally cornered, the advisor begs for mercy, swallowing his own noble pride, receiving an order to obey her with his head bowed. Satisfied at bending another's territory to her will, the girl smiles happily and summons everyone to formalize the shady paperwork of the newly forced military pact. Sometime later, inside a luxurious meeting room in the castle of the 69th floor, the survivors review the heavy bureaucracy of the treaty. Rin whispers very worriedly about the possible consequences, remembering that the Lord had never broken a direct order from the professor like that until today. The dictatorial arrogance instantly vanishes from the student's face, who starts trembling, insecurely babbling in hopes of guaranteed forgiveness because of her success. Suddenly, the massive doors of the hall are thrown back violently, and the human crosses the threshold, screaming the girl's name in despair. The sudden crash jolts the nobles out of their chairs in absolute panic, not understanding who would dare invade a diplomatic zone so roughly. With a look loaded with darkness, Neen walks with hard steps toward the table, while Seer stutters, trembling, trying to come up with a good excuse for the mess. But, totally breaking the expectation of fury, the professor drops to his knees, pulling the girl into a tight and overly protective hug. With his face pressed against hers, he collapses in relief upon confirming that the girl's body is completely in one piece after her irresponsible run to the war. Feeling the warm embrace and weighing her own actions in her heart, the little lord's eyes fill with tears and she finally apologizes. He then remembers the exact terror of when Butler Kane barged into the office in the middle of the day just to report the student's dangerous escape with the troops. In that agonizing instant, the human shoved the security guard restrictions aside and dove into the portal straight to hell, refusing to believe her stubbornness. During the harrowing crossing between worlds, he searched every memory looking for where he went wrong in raising the child, blind with sheer worry and guilt. The mere glimpse of imagining his ruler crushed by Decarabia's swords caused dark chills in the young man's mind throughout the entire trip. Snapping back to the present moment and his serious posture, Neen coldly kicks all the noble advisors out of the room, sparking outrage and scandal among the neighboring leaders. Out of patience to hear political whining, he activates a frightening magical fury, darkening the room as he growls the order for total and absolute evacuation. Feeling the thin air crush his lungs, Crowley freezes in fear, unable to comprehend how a supposed parasite possessed such lethal and oppressive arcane reserves. With the room plunged into pure silence, the professor restarts the lecture, pointing out her selfish flaws, reminding her the girl didn't have to carry the world alone. Trying to justify her military value to lighten the imminent scolding, Seer makes a sad pout and recites her glories, like defeating Balthazar and capturing Crowley. Neen praises his student, saying she did well and didn't mess things up. However, he warns that the weight on her shoulders is now much heavier when a faction loses its lord. The little ruler agrees quietly, not understanding the reason for so much caution. The professor explains that keeping her full strength a secret is a huge advantage against enemies. Owning up to the situation, Dantalion states that what's done is done and quickly grabs the new military alliance treaty to analyze it carefully. The Allied Lord analyzes the paperwork, noticing that the main idea is to abandon the 72nd floor and use his territory as the alliance's central base. Satisfied with a well-put-together strategic plan, Dantalion praises the clean work and asks if the strategist is going to grant what he had requested earlier. At that, the human confirms that the highly anticipated trip will happen, making Seer glow with extreme excitement over the finally fulfilled promise. But the joy is short-lived, as the professor warns that the outing will only happen after they solve the Decarabia problem, leaving the girl totally deflated. Getting back to the focus of the war meeting, the young man asks about the size of the enemy army and discovers they have over 30,000 soldiers ready for combat. Weighing the heavy numbers, the strategist admits it's a huge force. Nearby, Varuna sweats cold, thinking he's being judged for some recent lack of manners. Sweating nervously at the table, the captured mage Crowley warns that after that day's clash, Decarabia's troops were probably cut in half. With Lord Dantalion reminding them that his territory no longer has private troops, the professor looks for a way to fight while keeping the base secure. The allied glasses wearer points out they still count on Her Majesty Citri's strength, but warns that an all-out war will inevitably bring heavy damage that is hard to rebuild. Feeling the weight of guilt for the mess, the young ruler laments the situation. With that, Neen pets her head, asking her not to get discouraged and to take it all as a learning experience. Reflecting on his advantage of knowing the future, the human understands that things went off the perfect script he had planned, and now he needs to correct the course. Without many clean options left, the professor announces he'll use a method he didn't want to, deciding to step directly onto the battlefield with his own hands. Far away, in the imposing castle of the 68th floor, a messenger reports the complete disaster of the invasion, confirming the Golden Giant's defeat and the mage's capture. Overtaken by absolute fury over the failure, Lord Decarabia rages at his elite commanders, demanding results after all the investment he put into them. Trembling with fear before the throne, the warriors beg for a second chance, swearing that this time they'll manage to annihilate the neighboring floor's forces. Accepting the plea, the Lord demands not just the destruction of the glasses-wearing ally, but also the head of the young ruler, threatening to deal with his generals if they fail. Shortly after, already a bit calmer, the Lord sighs, evaluating his own dangerous demands, getting ready for the next steps of the imminent war. During an enemy army strategy meeting, a hulking general grumbles about the lack of smart plans after the brutal loss of their greatest knight. The harpy warrior named Rubia mocks the armored colleague's fall without understanding how he went down, taking a jab from her companion for not paying attention to the battle. Justifying the shameful retreat, a soldier points out that the fox commander appeared out of nowhere. The group leader agrees that falling back against her was the right call. Assessing the scenario, the enemy strategist recognizes the little lord's talent in building such a strong army, deciding they need to crush her before she becomes a bigger threat. Confident in a victory through sheer brutality, the hulking general suggests a direct confrontation, stating that their enormous numerical advantage guarantees the crushing of allied forces. Without patience for elaborate speeches, the harpy sums up the entire plan in few words, asserting that they simply need to strike first and with full force. The squad leader agrees with the harpy and orders everyone to prep for the march, but is brutally interrupted by a sudden crash at the door. A soldier bursts into the room in complete despair, screaming that their camp is under a surprise attack, leaving the generals in a state of pure shock. Away from the enemy base, on top of a sunny cliff, The professor enjoys the cool breeze while the Fox commander praises the success of the early march without any ambushes. Taking advantage of the ironic tranquility, the human asks if they can handle the job without Her Majesty's Citri's help, leaving the military officer totally dumbfounded by the question. Regaining her composure, the fox confesses her amazement, stating that the strategist always acts with a perfect plan and never takes a step without being absolutely certain of victory. Calmly admitting his mistake, Neen agrees with her, taking all the blame for the current mess for not having been able to foresee his students' impulsive behavior. Worried about the troop's safety, the commander questions the reason for taking such an absurd risk. He quickly answers that this is the fastest route with the fewest casualties. Staring intently at the enemy horizon, the young man gives a direct and unexpected order for the military officer to stay back there, protecting the rest of the army. Fearing for her superior's well-being, the warrior steps forward and grabs his arm firmly, desperately questioning if he truly intends to invade the enemy lines alone. With a calm snap of his fingers, the professor denies the suicidal idea and lets her know he'll only take the 2 humans they recently rescued to join him in the clash. Knowing the fox's natural distrust of foreigners, the human explains that this invasion will serve exactly as the ultimate loyalty test for the rookies. Casting a demanding look at the duo, the mentor orders them to prove their own worth on the battlefield. Trembling with anxiety, both immediately accept the order. As the trio advances along the rocky trails toward danger, the blonde boy swallows hard, remembering that the previous victory was only possible due to careful preparation. Observing the dense dark magic emanating from the strategist's hand, the youth reflects on his own uncertain strength, fearing that a lack of control send them straight to the grave. Walking a bit ahead, the professor maintains a relaxed demeanor, determined to end the war right then and there to ensure the little lord never has to risk herself again. The human girl breaks the silence, warning that a crowd of enemies is already waiting for them just over the hill. Without losing his sense of humor, the young man thanks the welcoming committee. Reaching the edge of the cliff, the group is faced with a massive military camp completely blocking the way, filled with soldiers armed to the teeth. With eyes glowing in an intense demonic blue and exuding pure danger, the strategist orders the duo to act as necessary and advances to decimate the adversaries. Away from the imminent clash inside the Carabia's command tent, the enemy strategist analyzes the confusing map along with the scouts' reports about the Allied advance. Using vision magic to observe the hill from a distance, the enemy leader frowns in confusion, noticing there is only a single silhouette standing on the horizon. Mounted on his armored horse, the hulking general warns that it reeks of an obvious trap, suggesting they send scouts before moving the whole army. Annoyed by the excessive caution, the harpy dismisses the ambush idea. She argues that she doesn't feel a single drop of magical buildup in the area, proving the hill is clear. The leader scolds the flying woman's arrogance, arguing that the complete absence of mana in the air is the biggest indicator that the opposing army truly fell back out of fear. Tired of her partner's conspiracy theories, Rubia mocks their cowardice, claiming that the 2 generals are just making up excuses not to attack. Out of patience with the group's sluggishness, the harpy aggressively takes flight toward the isolated hill, totally ignoring her allies' warning shouts. Watching his colleague disappear into the sky, the mounted warrior curses her recklessness. The strategist tries to calm him down, reminding him that the woman is protected by heavy spells. Cutting through the winds at high speed, the winged warrior grumbles about the pathetic slowness of the ground soldiers who prefer to send pawns to their doom. As she rapidly approaches the top of the cliff, she spots the small opposing trio standing on the rocks, confirming there isn't any huge hidden army there. Determined to steal all the glory of the victory, the harpy prepares a lethal dive to shatter the opponent's front line in a single devastating blow. But before she even completes her descent, the suited strategist exhibits a dark aura and murmurs just one simple, fatal, piercing command. Instantly, an immense pillar of dark magic violently erupts from the ground, impaling the harpy's body in mid-flight and sending her crashing through the dark skies. Shocked and completely ruined by the fulminating strike, the winged warrior plummets in agony, unable to comprehend how her journey ended in such a pathetic way. Rubia's broken body hits the stone ground with a hollow thud, kicking up dust and ending her arrogant participation in that long war of lords. Down below, the generals fall into absolute despair as they see their elite commander taken down in the blink of an eye, without even being able to identify the source of the attack. Admiring the brutal fall of his opponent, Neen clicks his tongue in disdain, stating that people who talk too much find a quick end in the middle of a war. Right after, he conjures a colossal and terrifying ancient white whale in the sky, whose immense red eyes stare down at the tiny enemy troops below. Maintaining the same elegant and relentless posture, the young man calls the mythical creature by name and politely orders it to clean up all the enemy trash scattered in the valley. Without mercy, the flying monster unleashes a massive pillar of direct magical destruction at the ground, sweeping away dozens of soldiers crying out for help. In the midst of the unleashed inferno, the hulking general tries to fight that is brutally swallowed by the pure energy, yelling in agony before turning to dust on the battlefield. Totally paralyzed by the absurd terror of the scene, Decarabia's strategist stutters in panic, admitting he's never witnessed a magical wipeout of that magnitude. Completely cornered and trembling on his horse, the surviving leader raises his eyes toward the cause of all that apocalypse, desperately searching for an answer. Faced with the terrified questioning about what he was, the professor maintains his threatening posture and returns the question with pure irony and deadly mockery. Watching his savior's brutal force from the front row, the blond boy whispers to his sword colleague, wondering if they actually need to do anything. Swallowing his own fear of imminent danger, the boy draws his dagger and remembers they took the risk and urgently need to prove they aren't just dead weight. Accepting the extreme challenge set by the professor, the warrior grips her blade and leaps aggressively through the cliff ruins toward the surviving troops. Fully trusting her companion's support, the girl channels an emerald aura around her body to drastically increase her speed in the reckless charge. The initial shock of the desperate attack breaks the infantry's formation. A demon soldier grinds his teeth, indignant that a simple human had the audacity to attack them. Before the adversaries can retaliate and crush the fearless swordswoman, the youth on top of the mountain fires his own light spells at the enemies on the field. With absolute precision, the young man summons a dense protective shield on his partner's back, ensuring she can slice through the opponents without suffering a single scratch. The brutal impact of the light magic explodes in the enemy camp, sweeping the front line in a blinding flash. Desperate over the clash, the surviving leader panics and yells, ordering all units to advance. With that, the young human Dane lands firmly on the rocky ground, surrounded by the aura of support magic. Taking advantage of the opening, Eri rushes in at high speed, cutting down the opponent without any mercy. With the area clear, she knocks down the enemy commander, who yells for help, calling an allied lord. The adversary glares at the swordswoman, annoyed, refusing to believe a simple human had the audacity to attack him. Answering the call, a monstrous winged lord appears on the battlefield, promising to tear the girl apart with his bare hands. Without stepping back a single pace, the swordswoman adjusts her stance and focuses entirely on the new colossal threat. But before the monster can attack, Commander Ren flashes through the air and cleaves the creature in two with a clean strike. Observing everything from afar, Neen asks the fox to keep her focus, warning that Decarabia should show up soon. Far from there, the maid Cecily looks at the horizon in awe, impressed with the destructive power working so well. One of the allied guards asks about the professor's whereabouts. At that, the ruler and the maid notice something down below. Pointing to the burning valley, the servant deduces that this can only be Nenin's doing. Inspired by the scene, Seer shows great confidence, wishing to get strong like that one day, being praised by the subordinate. Suddenly, Her Majesty Citri sneaks up, asking if the human knows that the girl came to welcome him in secret. Bothered by the insinuation, the little lord shoots a severe look, making the servant apologize for the inconvenient comment. Feeling the jealousy in the air, Her Majesty Citri teases the human, asking if she has feelings for the professor, receiving a furious glare from Seer. Realizing the lethal tension exuding from the girl, the noble backs off immediately and tries to fix the situation, quickly playing off her mistake. At that moment, a familiar voice calls the girl's name, revealing the strategist's silhouette safely walking up the hill. Relieved that the confrontation is over, Eri runs to her partner Dane, thanking him for all the support in the fight. Walking calmly beside Baphomet, the professor approaches the group and asks what his student is doing there. Pleased with the warm reception, he tells her he already cleared the area so the girl could gain some real combat experience. The young man informs them that the enemy castle is practically empty and asks Seer and the Fox Commander to finish the job together. Turning to the human duo, Neen praises them, stating that the long years of training finally paid off well. With that, the human promises to assign official missions to the two when they return, telling them to rest up a lot until then. Focused on the next steps, the strategist concludes that with that territory practically dominated, all that's left is finding what he's looking for. Far from there, inside the invaded castle, Lord de Caribia collapses to his knees on the floor, completely exhausted and injured. Analyzing the fallen enemy, the Fox military officer notes that he has lost all his glory, something the little ruler agrees with immediately. Rin reflects in awe on how the professor masters ancient magic, wondering how he learned something that should have been lost. Breaking the adversary's pride, Seer walks slowly and warns him that she isn't finishing him off only because the professor ordered him kept alive. Terrified by the double approach, the defeated lord desperately asks what they plan to do with him now. Maintaining the coldness of a conqueror, the ruler asks the soldier to step back a bit and leave the situation in her hands. Taken by a frightening aura, the girl brutally attacks the opponent with several sequential strikes, ensuring she wouldn't cross the line. Totally disfigured by the childish beating, the defeated lord stutters, begging for them to just get it over with. Stopping the beatdown, Seer tilts her head in confusion, not understanding how an opposing lord could be so weak on defense. Sweating cold at the scene, Rin intervenes, asking to take over, warning that the mentor would hate seeing his student act with such violence. Grasping the ally's hint, the girl calmly agrees and thanks the subordinate for the touch of conscience. But unfortunately for the duo, Neen enters the hall at that exact moment and asks the reason for that sudden thank you. Caught red-handed, the girl stutters, denying any trouble, while the strategist narrows his eyes, sensing that something is wrong. Following the trail of destruction, he finally notices the sprawled and humiliated body of the enemy lord, fallen in the middle of the staircase. Serious, the human tells the girl to stop lying and own up if she did something foolish, receiving a shy apology from her. The professor crouches near the ruined rival and notes in amazement that his student really did a number on the poor guy. Coughing up blood, de Caribia mutters he'd rather be gone, while Neen jokes, ironically, that the important thing is he survived. Confused by the plan, the Fox Commander asks the reason for keeping him around, since he would never surrender passively like Dantalion. Flashing a calculating look, the strategist clarifies he isn't sparing the rival's life out of pity, but rather to use him as a tool. Displaying a sparkling gem, Neen asks if his student knows the famous Starstone, the valuable specialty of that newly conquered floor. He explains he'll cross-reference info with the prisoners, while Seer recalls that the mine shifted places, making tracking difficult. Wiping the defeated man's face with a cloth, Neen reflects that capturing the advisors would be easier if the girl hadn't pummeled them all first. Thoughtful about the obstacle at hand, he murmurs, wondering how he'll extract the info since lords can't be brainwashed. At that exact instant, the sound of high heels echoes firmly down the hall, announcing an unexpected visit to the ruined room. Strutting in her noble pose, Her Majesty Citri introduces herself, claiming she heard the call for help and takes the opportunity to mock the fallen rival. Unimpressed, the human teases the woman, pointing out she must have dropped everything she was doing just to run over there. Ignoring the joke, the noble focuses her lethal gaze on the injured prisoner, blaming him for her old imprisonment issues. Observing the alliance partner, the professor notices she's already activating her special skill right there in front of everyone. Dry and focused, Citri demands the young man take the little lord out of the hall immediately, claiming she needs total concentration for the job. Not arguing with the expert, Neen agrees to the strict request and guides his student out of the room in total silence. Walking down the hall, Sierra asks how the woman will find the mines using fire magic. He explains she has a unique skill. Back in the main room, Citri grabs de Caribia's face demanding answers, but he violently refuses any kind of cooperation. Activating a seductive gleam in her eyes, the noble uses her charm magic and affectionately asks the dear lord to reveal the whereabouts of the stones. Completely overcome by the rival's mental spell, the prisoner gives in instantly and stammers, giving up the exact location of the precious mine. As a reward for his obedience, the ruler ignites the defeated man's body, while the poor guy gives thanks, slowly burning in a trance. After extracting everything, Citri suggests the human not sell the newly discovered stash, reminding him they need to secure a new sustainable source of income. Calmly, Neen answers he won't act greedily and that he already had these plans in mind since the beginning of the territorial invasion. Crossing her arms proudly, the woman proposes altering their old agreement, leaving the strategist totally surprised by her audacity. She dictates that she'll split the profits if the world knows it was her who conquered that floor. Not caring much, the young man accepts the bargain. The professor emphasizes that the ownership will be on paper only. With that, Citri agrees and accuses him of being a freeloader for wanting a free castle. The noble explains the charade is necessary because if her name remains tied to military victories, her rivals will try to stop her in the future. Satisfied with her strategic read, Neen praises her sharpness, ticking the woman off for insinuating she'd be dumb. In exchange for the fake military credit, the young man offers half of the valuable mine's entire production, catching his partner off guard with the offer. Holding the noble's hand firmly, the strategist seals the commitment, agreeing that all that risk was worth the promised profits. Stepping into the middle of the handshake, little Seer pushes the ally away, territoriality stating that the deal is officially closed. Exuding authority in her eyes, the girl highlights that theoretically, she's the one who should handle that heavy bureaucracy from then on. Intimidated by the child's frightening stare, the noble gulps, asking for her cut of the oars, and walks away quickly to get away from the danger. Not understanding the partner's sudden flight after the sealed deal, the professor watches the woman walk away while Seer hides her own threat. Getting back to what matters, the young man brings up the promised trip and asks if the student prefers to pack her bags now or clean up the mess first. Neen asks how the girl would handle that alone and says he'll take care of the mines, getting an excited confirmation from the student. A little while later, walking alone in her room, Seer rubs her own hand, remembering it had been a while since she held her mentor's hand. The girl blushes slightly, acknowledging she is no longer a child for him to pamper like before, but still feels swayed by the situation. Dancing happily around the room, the little lord plans that during their one-on-one trip, she'll hold the young man's hand as much as she wants. Already at the mines, the professor asks about the site's abandonment. His guard explains he told the workers to delay their shifts so they wouldn't get in the way of the investigation. The brute deduces he was brought along precisely because of his special ability to tell ores apart in the dark. Confirming the theory, the strategist orders the lackey to search the deepest layers for an ancient golden bracelet hidden there. Scratching his head, not understanding why the item is buried, the monster agrees to do the search, figuring it's a big secret. Surveying the environment, Neen reflects that it doesn't make much sense to hide an artifact in such a random place unless it's by video game logic. Walking through the crystals, the human recognizes that the absurd amount of ores justified the defeated lord's exaggerated wealth. Giving a calculating smile, the professor celebrates internally that half of all that monstrous profit now belongs to them. Focused on the future, he warns that news of conquering that floor will quickly reach the ears of the other lower leaders. With this new income source secured, the strategist concludes they will finally be able to fund and build a real army. At that, the guard gets the leader's attention, notifying him that he found a completely different rock at the bottom of the excavated cave. Asking for some space, the young man approaches the rocky wall and casts a powerful spell directly on the glowing spot. Using his extraction spell, the human surrounds the luminous rock with a greenish magical energy to remove the item trapped inside. Immediately, a blinding beam of light erupts from within the stone, completely illuminating the dark cave around them. Floating gently in the air, the ancient golden bracelet reveals itself intact, earning direct praise for the lackey for the perfect find. Analyzing the jewelry in his hands, the strategist recalls that the artifact was famous for drastically accelerating the growth of whoever wore it. Checking the item's stats, he confirms that the defensive and vitality attributes are still incredibly high, just like in his memory. Behind him, the rock monster falls to its knees, trembling, and struggles to beg the master to retract his crushing, magical aura. Surprised by his own unchecked strength, the professor apologizes and decides to be much more careful when using magic from then on. Back at the castle, the butler questions the need to use a blood seal on the prisoner, but the little lord guarantees it's the safest method. Sitting at the table, the informant lord hesitates to sign the contract but is threatened by the girl to suffer the same brutal fate as the recently defeated rival. Terrified by the child's threat, the prisoner hurriedly stamps the document and desperately announces he has concluded his part of the deal. Displaying a ruthless look, the ruler demands total obedience from the ex-lord and ends the meeting, ordering everyone to leave the room. Finding her mentor right after, the girl insecurely asks if she acted right, receiving sincere praise for her imposing posture. Hyped about completing her duties, she quickly changes the subject and asks to go plan their trip to a quiet and isolated place right away. Patting the student's head, the strategist promises to set up a perfect location by the next day and tells the girl to get plenty of rest. Enjoying the moment of peace, the young man takes the ancient golden bracelet from his pocket and hands the special gift directly to the girl. Amazed by the jewelry's shine, the little ruler thanks him for the gift with a radiant smile on her face. Hearing the order to never take the accessory off her wrist, the girl squeezes the item, determined to never let her mentor leave. Far from demonic territory, the two young humans walk through the capital's busy streets, feeling the weight of returning to their home world. Remembering the professor's orders, the warriors go over their mission to infiltrate in disguise to investigate the sudden drop in enemy invasions. Splitting the tasks, the blonde boy says he'll head to another city and they agree to meet up monthly to swap collected intel. Worried about the risks, the swordswoman questions if the forged documents will be enough to hide their true identities. Holding his sword hilt tightly, her partner tries to calm her down, admitting the situation is tough but absolutely necessary. Putting a hand on his friend's shoulder, the boy guarantees they are in no danger of being recognized since everyone who knew them is already gone. Trying to lighten the heavy mood, the warrior teases, asking her to avoid picking fights with thugs, making the girl blush with annoyance. Anticipating bigger problems, the blonde hands his partner a blue stone necklace to use in case the mission spirals completely out of control. Explaining the item serves as an emergency alarm between them, the young man says his goodbyes, wishing her luck on her investigation. Walking alone on a mountain trail, the swordswoman grumbles about her friend's overprotectiveness until she is interrupted by a suspicious voice. Surrounded by a bunch of armed peasants, the young woman is threatened and frustratingly realizes her partner was totally right about the local dangers. Analyzing the group's clumsy posture, she notes the men just look like desperate locals rather than dangerous criminals. Raising a pitchfork defensively, the gang's leader justifies the mugging, blaming the state of poverty and chaos that ruined the entire country. Confused by the revelation, the swordswoman asks what happened in the kingdom and discovers that the great noble houses went crazy and started burning down villages. Completely shocked by the harsh news, the girl freezes while the peasant finds her lack of information strange. Hiding her demonic past, she lies saying she lived isolated in the mountains for years, making the fake bandits feel genuine pity. Believing the young woman suffered deep trauma, the group puts their weapons away and offers her shelter, an invitation she politely declines. Changing his tone, the man warns that this lame isolation story would make the Holy Knights eliminate the girl for witchcraft without a second thought. The peasant explains that the church blamed the hidden witches in the country for the mysterious disappearance of thousands of people over the last few years. With tears in his eyes, the man recalls how the soldiers burned everything down under the excuse of purification and kidnapped the children, including his own daughter. Clenching her fists in outrage, the warrior suspects the church would never have the strength to do that alone without facing a revolt from the powerful guilds. Lamenting the outsider's naivety, the leader reminds her that in that sacred territory, the church's word carries the absolute weight of the law. The man concludes his tragic explanation, stating that no one possesses the courage or military power to contradict the Pope's direct orders. Far from the isolated mountain, the massive, imposing towers of the Grand Sacred Temple rise in the center of the human capital under the starry night. Inside a luxurious room, the religious leader calmly steps out of his hot bath, drying himself with a towel. Relaxing provocatively on top of the velvet bed, a demon with beautiful features sarcastically asks about the progress of the investigations. Wearing his bathrobe, the Pope laughs in satisfaction, reporting that the violent searches have already found several fake, demonic collaborators across the country. Pleased with the havoc caused by the fake saint, the creature praises the old man's relentless effort in destroying his own nation. Kneeling on the bed in a pathetic manner, the religious leader appreciates the fake affection, claiming that only the creature understands and values all his hard work. Hearing the Pope affectionately call her Lily, the demon extends her hand with a malicious smile, ready to take advantage of the old man's blind submission.